You want to know how this is possible? Erike V asked with a crooked grin. A strange energy stirred within him, ancient yet familiar, as if it had always slumbered in his bones. His blue eyes shimmered, igniting with a light like stars piercing through midnight clouds. He extended his hand, focusing. A pebble on the ground quivered, then rocketed upward, hovering in front of his palm. It spun violently, vibrating with raw force. Erike slowly closed his hand around it. Crack! The stone splintered and crumbled into dust. This feels incredible. His chest swelled with a thrill he hadn't known in years. Turning toward the Valkyries watching him warily, his voice darkened. What am I? He echoed their unspoken question. I'm human, just like you, and I have one purpose. His expression shifted, eyes narrowing with a predator's glare. To avenge the dragons for what they did to my village. His voice thundered with fury, and even though he was only level 4, the Valkyries, elite level 9s, instinctively stepped back, unsettled by the weight behind his words. You call yourselves protectors of the realm, yet you hunt down your own kind to please kings and lords. His voice dropped to a deadly calm, like still water before a storm. You're traitors to humanity. The Valkyries were silent. A moment of stillness passed, haunting and heavy. In that moment, something long buried stirred in their hearts. Guilt, remorse, memory. What? Cat got your tongue? Erike said mockingly, lifting several jagged stones into the air behind him. They hovered like blades, angled at the Valkyries. The one he had once strangled finally stepped forward, her eyes cold steel. He's a criminal, a disgrace to the nation. That crime deserves death. Without another word, she lunged, faster than the eye could follow, her silver sword gleaming like moonlight. Erike reacted instantly, launching the spinning stones at her. Clang! Thunk! The stone struck but bounced harmlessly away. Foolish, she hissed. Telekinesis shields us. Your tricks won't work. She closed the gap. Her blade was nearly at his throat, when she suddenly jabbed a finger forward. Telekinetic blast. An invisible force slammed into him. Boom! He flew backward like a rag doll and crashed into the wall, bricks crumbling around him. Gritting his teeth, Erike forced himself up. Pain flared in every joint. Then the pressure hit. An invisible weight crushed down on him like a mountain, pressing him into the floor. Ah! He screamed, his body nearly breaking under the force. Oh! The Valkyrie said with a smirk. Still alive, under 200 kilos? Impressive. She raised her hand again. The weight doubled. His bones creaked. Blood dripped from his lips. And yet, something was changing inside him. Adapting. Evolving. You see, not even Draken, at his peak, had ever gone toe-to-toe with a level 9. And Erike? He was no warrior god. Not yet. But he had adapt. His muscle strained. His vision blurred. And still he knelt, defiant, eyes burning with stubborn fire. But eventually, even defiance has limits. The telekinetic force slammed him to the floor once more. The Valkyrie approached, sneering, and lifted him into the air with a flick of her wrist. You'll come with us. Quietly, Erike coughed blood but smiled. What if I don't? Telekinesis, level 5, cannot be leveled up. A blue prompt blinked before his eyes. Erike's battered face lit up. Adapt had done the impossible. Evolve his telekinesis in real time. That's busted, he thought, exhilarated. It wasn't just survival. It was evolution. With newfound strength, he pushed back against the crushing force. Slowly but surely, the invisible hand began to falter. The Valkyrie's eyes narrowed. What? The pressure wavered. Her control slipped. Why is it weaker now? She grimaced and tightened her grip. But before she could go further, another Valkyrie landed silently behind her and placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Enough. What? I'm this close to killing him. Our orders were to capture, not execute. Are you defying command, Elsie? Elsie faltered, her grip loosening as the air grew tense. And no, the pressure lifted. Erike V exhaled shakily, the invisible weight no longer crushing him. Relief bloomed in his chest, brief and fragile. but his body was broken. His vision blurred into smears of light and shadow. Strength had all but abandoned him. With a faint groan, he collapsed to the ground like a marionette with its strings cut. Adapt had granted him telekinesis, but not without cost. The backlash had ravaged his body, tearing at his insides. Without the regeneration support from his main body, he would have already died. His consciousness hovered on the edge, ready to fade, but slowly, clarity began to return. The familiar tingle of healing coursed through him. Regeneration activated, repairing torn flesh and ruptured vessels. And alongside it, Adapt continued its relentless work, gradually reinforcing his battered frame. Is it strengthening me? He wondered, startled. It had never occurred to him before. But yes, it was happening. Adapt wasn't just healing. It was enhancing him, rebuilding his body faster, stronger. Until now, he'd relied on the body-strengthening skill, a crude, low-level power that hadn't scaled with his growing challenges. It was useful in the beginning, but quickly fell behind. But this was different. This was evolution in motion. He remembered how easily he'd overpowered the Valkyrie when he'd strangled her earlier. Even without powerful enhancements, she'd felt weak. If Adapt could do this on its own, without needing separate skills, then he had found something truly game-changing. "Let's bring him back," said the second Valkyrie, the one who'd stopped Elsie. He was lifted into the air again. This time, he didn't resist. He allowed his body to hang limp, playing the part of a broken prisoner. But in his mind, a truth echoed with thrilling certainty. Every disaster hides a blessing. And this, being captured, beaten, brought low, this was no tragedy. This was an opportunity. He could leave any time, return to the main body in an instant. Unless they had a way to block him. Draken had been sealed before, in a capsule that emitted electromagnetic interference, that had completely cut off the recall ability. A troubling possibility. Still, judging by the Valkyrie's behavior, they weren't planning on executing him immediately. That gave him time, and time was all he ever needed. They shot into the sky, Valkyrie soaring like a missile with him in tow. As their figures vanished beyond the clouds, the hidden townsfolk slowly emerged. They gazed across the shattered battlefield, the scorched earth, the cracked terrain, the lingering scent of ash. Who the hell was that guy? Criminal, probably. Must have been some kind of rebel to insult the Empire right in front of the Valkyries. The crowd murmured, nervous but curious. Eventually, interest waned and life resumed. Valkyries were more than just enforcers. They were idols of justice and power. Beautiful, deadly, and elite. They inspired awe as much as fear. But none of them truly knew what had just slipped through their fingers. Sometime later, drip, a solitary droplet echoed through the stillness. Erike's eyes fluttered open. Darkness, complete, suffocating black. Cold metal bit into his back, sending icy needles up his spine. He tried to move. Clink. Chains. Thick, heavy, and unforgiving. His limbs were shackled tightly. Even the slightest movement drew metallic groans from the restraints. Erike flexed slightly, just enough to test their integrity. Crack. One of the links groaned under the tension, but he stopped himself before snapping it outright. He didn't want them to know what he could do. Not yet. Instead, he let his body go slack. His breath came in harsh, shaky bursts, like a man too broken to resist. Then, footsteps. Measured. Calm. Approaching from the far end of the room. A faint light flared ahead, growing brighter. Erike narrowed his eyes against the glare, then focused through the haze. A silhouette approached. A woman's voice, smooth and cold as frost. "What's your name?" "Zarek," he answered after a pause, crafting the lie with care. "Where are you from?" "Nightingale Town." BZZZT. Electricity exploded through him. White-hot agony tore across his nerves. "Oh!" he screamed, convulsing. "Don't lie to me," the interrogator said, voice like an executioner's blade. "Again. I told you." BZZZZT. Another wave, harsher than before. His muscles spasmed violently. But within his pain-glazed eyes, something shimmered. Clarity. He felt the electricity. And not just with his skin, he understood it. His body didn't just endure the current. It recognized it, integrated it. Adapt was studying it. And the truth was, he wasn't even new to lightning. His main body had already acquired an affinity for it. Pain was just another lesson now. He howled again, raw and theatrical. But beneath the cries, he was calm. She didn't know it yet, but every second she tortured him, he was growing stronger. The lightning stopped. "You appeared out of nowhere," she said coldly. "No records, no trace. We combed every camera, every city checkpoint. And are you seriously telling me you slipped through it all undetected?" "I'm telling the truth," Erike whispered hoarsely, lips cracked, breath shallow. "Believe it or don't." The woman stared at him, the faint blue crackle of voltage still dancing at her fingertips. Then she turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the cold dark. A smile flickered across Erike's bruised lips. Let them keep digging. Let them keep shocking. Every second they underestimated him was 1 second closer to their downfall.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Zurich, Erike V, narrowed his eyes as he looked at the woman before him. She wore glasses and a white skirt, complemented by a blue coat. Her gaze was cold, filled with indifference as she looked at him. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "All right, let's say I believe you, for now, that you managed to completely hide your presence, sneak into our capital unnoticed, and even reach the slums. But why did you attack the guards?" "You know why," Zarek replied with a cough, blood spilling from his mouth. The woman stared at him in silence. With the surveillance of the hummingbird, of course they knew the full extent of the situation and even punished the guards because of it. However, if they were to admit their mistake, how could they preserve their dignity? The Empire's image must remain unblemished. If it were to be tainted, public opinion would slowly begin to shift. So, no matter what, this had to be swept under the rug. Even if Zarek was in the right, they would argue that he should have handled it differently, that he could have resolved things with words instead of resorting to violence. "You could have talked things out." "Don't give me that bullshit," Zarek interrupted with a chuckle, his eyes half-lidded, his grin wide. "You think if I talked to them, things would have just sorted themselves out?" "Very well," the woman said, closing her eyes with a sigh. "You will serve a prison sentence of 5 to 10 years in labor." "Labor?" Zarek echoed, confusion lacing his tone. "That's right," she replied. "You'll be sent to the mines as a laborer and spend the next 10 years there, reflecting on your mistake." "I see," Zarek muttered, his voice heavy with despair. "It's not too late to reveal your identity. If you do, we might even consider reducing your sentence," the woman said, a glint of curiosity or calculation in her eyes. To that, Zarek said nothing. He simply lowered his head and fell into complete silence. "Very well." She sighed and went away without question. Zarek was silent. In this darkness, it really felt lonely and cold. Should I go back to the main body? He was thoughtful for a moment, but in the end, he still sighed. There was still time before the dragon hunt began, and he could always find a way to solve things. However, if he returned and faced an even worse condition where he couldn't even teleport back, what would he do then? There's always a possible worst outcome, and Zarek didn't want to risk it yet. He might be able to take some benefits and escape out of this place. Although this was a difficulty that most likely no one with his strength could achieve, Zarek wasn't alone, and his adapt skill could also have some benefit to it. Suddenly, his nose twitched. It was scentless and felt like air. However, his instinct was screaming at him. His eyelids gradually felt heavy, and he was about to go to sleep. With a heavy consciousness, his eyes closed, only for the faintest movement of his brows as a blue panel appeared in front of him. "You have adapted to the gas of Noxus." In an instant, his consciousness returned to him. However, he still remained in that state, controlling his heart and bodily features so as not to reveal himself. Zarek immediately felt himself being gradually lifted from the ground and carried. The chains on his body were removed, and 2 metal bracers were applied to his hands and legs, lifting him off into the air. Soon, he felt weightless as the wind bristled in his face, and his hair fluttered freely with the wind. Oh, he thought in his heart with calmness, while trying to sense the environment as much as possible. After some time, he was carried over and put on the ground, and the guards quickly left the place right after it. Around him were numerous footsteps and murmurs that surrounded him almost completely. For a moment, he was a little stunned, until a footstep quickened the distance and a beep sound echoed. Immediately, Zarek felt his entire body being scanned, from his internal organs to all the internal parts. He looks normal. There is no abnormality detected. A man spoke. Was he hiding previously then? Another voice sounded, this time a female's. It seems so. There is no way someone immediately becomes a level 4 or 5 telekinetic human, and his wavelength is solid as well. He seems to have practiced his telekinesis until perfect compression, the man said, his voice full of regret. In simple terms, he is a genius. Unfortunately, he has become a prisoner. Maybe we should get him mandatory training. That seems to be the optimal choice if he really is a genius, the female spoke. Zarek felt this female's voice was very familiar, as if he had heard it before. His thoughts swirled rapidly, and he immediately stopped the urge to roar out loud the name Elsie. Anyway, he was lifted into the air again, and he immediately felt himself become weightless once more. The very next moment, he felt the wind bristle past him, and they traveled quickly. This time, even longer than before. After some time, he could hear the clinking sound of metal clashing. Then he landed on a metal floor, the coldness of the metal seeping into his skin. Some people spoke in whispers around him, but Zarek could hear it loud and clear as if they weren't whispering at all. Is he going to join us soon? Hee, a new prey has appeared. We will abuse him. Zarek's ears twitched as he heard the voices, leaving him in an almost speechless state. After some time, he was carried to something like a prison cell, and a splash of cold water from a bucket was splashed on him. Zarek was immediately startled awake. He stood up from the ground and looked around his surroundings with an incredulous expression. In front of him was a soldier in a metal suit with a gun in his hand that shone with a red light. Zarek looked at the soldier and spoke in the faintest voice. "Where am I?" The soldier replied in a mocking tone. "This is the mine, kid. Be prepared for the worst." He spoke with a smirk, then turned around and left, closing the door behind him and casting one last malicious smirk in Zarek's direction. Zarek tried to move around. However, the cuffs on his hands and legs were firmly attached, with electromagnetic waves occasionally zapping him whenever he used even an iota of strength. His eyes flashed with a calculative gaze. At this time, a small mini door to the cell opened, and from it came food, a simple cold hard bread. Zarek raised his brows in surprise and crawled his way to the bread. "I am supposed to eat without the support of my hand," he thought, then opened his mouth and silently ate the bread. He was no warrior and didn't think much about eating like an animal. The only sound to escape his lips was a chuckle as the noise of the cold bread being eaten echoed around him, almost reverberating. After he ate the last bits of it, he burped in satisfaction and just laid on the ground, patiently waiting. Then, after just a few minutes, a soldier opened the door and walked in front of him. "You are surprisingly obedient. I can't escape this place. Why should I waste my time here?" His shoulders slumped to the ground, carefree and lazy in tone. "Ha! You wouldn't be so nonchalant after doing an honest day of work, brat." The soldier grinned with uncontrollable malice and opened the chains around his legs, allowing him free mobility. "What makes you think that I will instantly kill you or take you hostage?" Zarek, freed from his chains, spoke with narrowed eyes. "Try me then, brat." The soldier shrugged with nonchalance and opened his arms as if inviting him to kill him. Zarek looked at the soldier, but didn't act. To him, this soldier might seem strong. However, he was nothing in front of him. But seeing the unfounded confidence, there was definitely something fishy about it. Or not. With his legs finally free, Zarek grinned. "All right, The soldier blinked, confusion flickering in his eyes. But before he could process the danger, An invisible force crashed into him like a tidal wave, hurling him into the air. His limbs flailed, struggling violently. Zarek's eyes narrowed, honing in on the man's neck. His voice dropped to an icy whisper. Die! Snap! A sickening crack tore through the room. Blood exploded in a violent geyser, painting the walls, the floor, everything. The crimson spray drenched Zarek in an instant, warm and metallic. A moment later, the man's head hit the ground with a chilling thud. The sound echoed ominously through the space. Ah! Even Zarek froze, a stunned look crossing his face. He stared at the severed head, dumbfounded. Just like that. He's dead? For a moment, he took a breath to recollect his thoughts. Why was he so confident? Soon, his question was answered as a level 9 telekinetic human entered the room and looked at the severed corpse. The level 9 telekinetic human was shirtless, with a muscular body and countless battle-hardened scars while wearing a pair of military pants. He turned toward Zarek and spoke in a cold tone. Brat, you are dead. Zarek furrowed his brow and spoke sheepishly. It was a misunderstanding. I accidentally killed him. You mistakenly killed the soldier. The shirtless man raised an eyebrow. Yes, this was completely a misunderstanding. Zarek nodded, as if to confirm the shirtless man's inquiry. Really? The shirtless man scoffed and looked at the soldier's body with disdain. However, he died in my presence, so take responsibility, brat. The man vanished in place, disappearing almost instantaneously. Zarek's grin never left his face as he spread his telekinesis outward. Although the man was invisible to his eyes, telekinetically he could still detect him as if he were standing in broad daylight. However, before he could react, the man was already upon him and punched directly at his guts. Cough! Zarek immediately kneeled down, coughing blood. He cried out loud in pain. Oh! His internal organs almost felt completely re-rendered just from that simple punch. Brat, do you know what a telekinetic body user is? The shirtless man smirked. He grabbed Zarek's hair and forced him to look into his eyes. Looking into the boundless blue pupils without a shred of fear, the shirtless man spoke. I like your eyes, brat. Are you not afraid of me? He raised his leg and directly kicked Zarek's head, sending him flying through the air. Zarek landed on the ground with a cold thud. Blood dripped from his head, forming a small puddle beneath him. Zarek slowly raised his head with heavy breaths and lay on the ground, looking at the cold ceiling as his chest heaved up and down rapidly. But Zarek didn't have any fear in his heart. Instead, there was excitement in his eyes. While his body was injured, it was healing rapidly at the same time, and growing stronger as well. Adapting. His body was gradually getting stronger. Oi, oi, you are a strange brat. The shirtless man walked up to him and crouched down to his level, looking at him with a strange gaze. How are you so excited instead of afraid, or even in pain? You wouldn't understand, old man, Zarek said with a grin while coughing. Oh, I wouldn't understand. The shirtless man smirked at him, stood up, raised his leg, and started kicking him right in the head, delivering concussion after concussion. Ah! Zarek screamed in agony and pain. At first, the pain was unbearable, but after some time, he had already adapted to it, and his skull became thick. So thick that even the shirtless man kept kicking again and again, until Zarek's eyes fluttered shut, his consciousness slipping. Umph. Who said you could sleep, brat? He raised his leg and brought it crashing down. A sharp cry tore from Zarek's throat as a sickening crunch echoed through the room. His eyes shot open, bloodshot, veins bulging across the whites. His brows knit tightly. It felt like his nerves were being twisted into knots. Every fiber of his body screamed in agony. But the man didn't stop. The relentless kicks came one after another, merciless and brutal. But amidst the storm of pain, something changed. Slowly, Zarek's body began to adapt. His flesh toughened, his bones mended, and his strength began to grow, quietly, steadily. What a masochistic way to grow stronger, he thought with a strange mix of awe and disbelief. He truly embodied the phrase, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger." As long as he didn't die, Zarek would continue to adapt. His bones, his organs, everything being battered, were slowly toughening, evolving through the torment. In a desperate attempt, Zarek unleashed his telekinesis toward the shirtless man. But the moment it made contact, it shattered instantly. A thick blue vein throbbed on his forehead. His mind reeled. Everything blurred. His world twisted into madness. Suddenly, he was in what looked like a candy land, slimy bubblegum beneath his feet, towering candy cane pillars along the walls. Zarek blinked, and the world shifted again. The shirtless man now looked like a towering chocolate monster, mercilessly beating him black and blue. The creature snickered. "Scared yet, brat?" Zarek's voice was cold, even as his mind reeled from the backlash of his shattered telekinesis. "No." "Oh." The man shrugged with mock curiosity. "So if I beat you to death, would I get in trouble?" Zarek stared at the chocolate-skinned brute, his gaze unwavering. "No," he said, not a single trace of fear in his tone. "Very well." A grin spread across the man's face. He raised his leg and brought it crashing down onto Zarek's chest. A horrible crack echoed through the air as his ribs caved in. Zarek bit down hard, jaw clenched, enduring the pain with an unnatural, almost monstrous tenacity. Zarek ground his teeth, a strange, grating sound echoing through the room. His legs were already broken, his ribs shattered. His mind was lost in a haze of confusion and pain. Only his hands remained intact. If those were destroyed too, he'd be nothing more than a sack of broken bones, barely clinging to life. The shirtless man showed no mercy. With a single brutal motion, he crushed Zarek's hands. "Oh!" Zarek's scream tore through the room, raw and ragged. The man grabbed him by the collar and hoisted him into the air. His eyes locked onto Zarek's boundless blue eyes, fingers slowly reaching forward, hovering inches from his eyes, as if ready to gouge them out at any moment. Zarek's pupils dilated. The shirtless man leaned in, his voice low and cruel. "Your eyes, they're fascinating. I've never seen anything like them. And that unbreakable will of yours? I want to crush it, completely destroy it." His fingers crept closer, inch by inch, until they pressed against Zarek's eyes. A sharp pain surged through him as blood began to stream down his cheeks, pouring from his eyes like tears. Zarek trembled, feeling the edge of total blindness approaching, until suddenly the pressure stopped. The man paused, then let out a dry, ironic chuckle. "Well, that was certainly interesting." Without warning, he raised Zarek high and hurled him against the wall. Bang! The stone cracked under the impact. Zarek collapsed to the floor with a dull thud, barely conscious. His vision swam, everything around him a blur of noise and color. Darkness threatened to consume him. "Brat, let's fight again another time. For now." The shirtless man glanced around, then smirked. "You'll sit in this prison." His gaze fell on the decapitated guard nearby. Without hesitation, he extended his hand and slowly clenched his fingers into a fist. Bang! The corpse exploded into a mist of blood and flesh, painting the air red. Without another word, the man turned and walked away, footsteps fading. He left behind a bleeding, coughing Zarek with his body broken, his mind fractured. With great effort, Zarek raised a mangled hand and pointed weakly toward the door. Blood smeared his cracked lips as he whispered, "You will regret this." Then his arm dropped, and he collapsed, eyes closing, body going still. But only minutes passed before consciousness returned. His vision cleared. The haze in his mind lifted. No longer disoriented. No longer lost. His body had already recovered at least halfway, and he could move if he wanted to. But Zarek didn't. He lay still, unmoving. Minutes passed, and then complete recovery. He felt it. Stronger, faster, better. An overwhelming surge of energy coursed through his veins, flooding every corner of his body with raw power. It was unlike anything he had felt before. How strong am I now? The thought echoed in his mind. But Zarek remained on the ground, eyes shut, body limp, playing the part of the broken and beaten. For now, he couldn't afford to move. Not yet. Revealing his strength too soon would only bring trouble. Once I can handle a level 9, I'll break out of this place. Zarek's eyes opened just a sliver, a sharp glint flashing within, then quickly shut again as he returned to feigned slumber. To test his strength, he applied the slightest pressure to his handcuffs. Crack! A jagged fracture formed instantly, the cuffs on the verge of shattering. Zarek immediately stopped, letting his body fall still once more. No need to reveal his hand. Not yet. If they sensed anything unusual, it would only invite unwanted attention. For now, silence was his ally. A true hunter lets the prey wander, unaware, unguarded until the moment arrives. And when it does, the time to strike will come, Zarek murmured in his heart. I will destroy everything right in front of you. He didn't know how much time had passed, but eventually, the heavy cell doors swung open with a metallic groan. 2 guards entered, clad in standard-issue soldier uniforms. Is he dead? One of them asked hesitantly, eyeing Zarek's limp, motionless form on the ground. The other scoffed and walked over, a frown etched into his face. He grabbed Zarek by the hair and lifted his head. What are you so scared of? He's just a damn prisoner. He gave a short chuckle, glancing down at Zarek again. Then he froze. His eyes met Zarek's, those boundless blue pupils glowing faintly beneath half-lidded lashes. The soldier's face drained of color, turning pale as paper. Without a word, he stumbled backward, releasing Zarek immediately and bolting toward the door. A sharp, sour stench followed him. He was scared shitless. Zarek slowly rose from the ground, his movements steady, deliberate. He took a step forward, then another, closing the distance toward the 2 guards. The first soldier stiffened, swallowing hard. Fear flickered in his eyes, but he forced himself to stand his ground. Zarek stopped in front of him. Lead the way, he said calmly. The soldier blinked, confused. I said lead the way, Zarek repeated, his voice low but firm. Aren't you here to make me mine? Why, yes, the soldier stammered, still stunned but inwardly sighing in relief. At least Zarek wasn't tearing them apart yet. He turned, casting an annoyed glance at the second soldier, who was still clutching the doorway like his life depended on it. Who was it that was talking about being brave earlier? He grumbled internally. The second soldier was trembling violently, reeking of fear, literally. The disgusting stench wafting from his body made it clear. One didn't need to imagine his condition. It was written all over him. Cough, cough. The second soldier cleared his throat, cheeks flushing a deep shade of pink as he spoke in a casual tone. Don't think I was scared. I was just being tactical, calling for reinforcements while, well, the smell messes with his telekinesis, makes it harder to focus. The first soldier fought the urge to roll his eyes and a stronger urge to beat the second one to a pulp. But instead, he glanced sideways at the pale-skinned young man with long golden hair and piercing blue eyes. His heart skipped a beat. Follow me. Zarek nodded obediently and stepped forward without hesitation. The first soldier pushed open the heavy door, and for the first time in what felt like ages, Zarek saw the outside world again. At first, the sudden flood of light overwhelmed him, forcing his eyes to squint and adjust. But as his vision cleared, he was utterly flabbergasted. The entire place sparkled with countless crystals, their glow illuminating the vast, dome-like chamber. Above him stretched a transparent, glassy dome, beyond which lay an endless void, dark, infinite, and silent. Where is this place? This thought raced through his mind as he took in the surreal beauty around him. The first soldier cleared his throat, regaining some measure of confidence. All right, follow me. Okay, Zarek replied with a steady voice. Soon, Zarek was led deeper underground. At first, the floor beneath him was cold metal, but gradually it gave way to damp, muddy earth. Around him, many others like him were being escorted, mostly with a single guard, though a few were flanked by 2. When the prisoners caught sight of the 2 guards accompanying Zarek, their eyes widened in horror. One by one, they avoided his gaze and stayed far away. Interesting. Zarek observed the scene with a nonchalant gaze. It wasn't just him, Others with 2 guards received the same treatment. The prisoners with only 1 guard avoided them entirely, lowering their heads and refusing to make eye contact. It was obvious. Those with 2 guards were considered far more dangerous, so dangerous that the others were scared out of their minds, too afraid to even glance their way. As Zarek continued walking deeper underground, he eventually came upon a cavernous area, dimly lit, with countless oars embedded in the rough stone walls. "Get to mining," said the first soldier beside him, his voice tinged with lingering fear. Zarek simply nodded. Then he looked down at his cuffs. "How am I supposed to mine like this?" "All right." With trembling hands, the first soldier took out a key and unlocked the chains. Now free, Zarek stretched his body casually, his movements calm and unbothered. The soldier handed him a strange, silver pickaxe. But before Zarek could examine it, his attention was drawn to the other prisoners around him. Every time they struck the wall with their pickaxes, their entire bodies trembled violently. They screamed in agony, some collapsing to their knees. A few coughed up blood, and others were so badly injured they fainted on the spot. All around him, the air was filled with the chorus of pain, screams echoing through the dim, ore-filled chamber. Zarek's eyes narrowed with curiosity. These ores weren't ordinary. There was more to them than met the mortal eye. So, he raised his pickaxe and slammed it into the wall. Bang! Cracks spread across the stone with ease. Zarek tilted his head, confused, until a terrifying vibration surged from the pickaxe through his entire body. His frame trembled violently. In an instant, his internal organs were damaged. Bones cracked. Muscles tore apart. "Oh!" Zarek closed his eyes as regeneration and adapt activated simultaneously. Within mere breaths, his body was completely healed. No, not just healed. It had grown stronger. A glint flashed in his eyes as he opened them once more. Then, without hesitation, he resumed mining, slamming his pickaxe into the wall again and again. Each strike destroyed his body anew, but just as quickly, it healed. And with every cycle of destruction and regeneration, his body was reforged tougher, stronger, more resilient. The loud clang of Zarek's pickaxe striking the wall echoed through the cavern, drawing everyone's attention instantly. All mining ceased. Eyes widened. Bodies froze. One prisoner collapsed to his knees, trembling as he pointed at Zarek. "How is that possible? This can't be real." Another stammered, disbelief written all over his face. "Every strike destroys your body, no matter how strong you are. But this bastard, he's mining like it's nothing. How strong is his body?" Even the soldiers, momentarily entranced by Zarek's inhuman performance, finally snapped out of it and exchanged glances before grinning. "Get back to work, scum," one of them barked. "If you don't manage at least a quarter of his output, then none of you are getting food tonight." The prisoners, gripped by fear, scrambled to their positions and began mining with everything they had. The results were immediate. Pickaxes slammed into stone, and fresh waves of screams filled the air as bodies broke under the strain. But as they worked, a dark resentment began to fester in their hearts. If this bastard wasn't showing off, we wouldn't be forced to mine like this. That bitter thought echoed in the minds of nearly everyone. Even the prisoners guarded by 2 soldiers, though treated better than the rest, shared the same growing hatred for Zarek. His monstrous output had raised the standard for all of them, making their lives even more unbearable. And yet, unaware of the animosity he had stirred, or perhaps simply indifferent to it, Zarek continued to mine without pause, his movements steady and relentless. Even if he did know, it was unlikely he would have cared. Truthfully, Zarek would have been just another lazy bum if not for one thing. He could feel the improvement in his body, and the improvement was significant. His body had already toughened under the brutal beatings from that man earlier, but now, with every strike of the pickaxe, his physique was evolving even further. If this pace continued, it wouldn't be long before his body alone became a formidable weapon. And once he combined that with his telekinetic abilities, I'll become a terrifying entity. A glint of excitement flashed in his eyes as he doubled down, swinging the pickaxe with renewed vigor and full force. After several hundred strikes, the wall finally gave way, and with a satisfying crack, a glowing crystal gem fell into his palm. Zarek's eyes lit up. His true eyes skill activated automatically, scanning the gem in an instant. Latinium. Description: a conductor for telekinesis. Whoa! Just as Zarek was about to examine it further, the gem was swiftly snatched from his hand by the nearby soldier. His eyes snapped toward the guard. It's protocol, the guard stammered, wearing a bitter expression. We're required to collect all mined gems. Zarek said nothing. He simply picked up his pickaxe and resumed mining, wordless and indifferent. By the end of the day, he had mined 56 gems. For the average prisoner, even unearthing a single gem was nearly impossible. When the grueling day finally ended, Zarek was handed a piece of cold, hard bread. To most, it would have been barely edible. But with his devour skill, Zarek's body broke down every bit of nutrients within it. In fact, if it ever came to it, he could consume and digest even raw metals. His body would process it all effortlessly. The cycle resumed the next day. By now, Zarek's body had strengthened to the point where he could completely resist the destructive vibrations from the pickaxe. His movements were faster, more fluid, almost effortless. Within just a few minutes, he had already unearthed 20 gems. It was at that moment a familiar figure silently approached him. The shirtless scarred man. He stood before Zarek with an expression of complete calm, almost too calm. His eyes narrowed, and a faint, unsettling smile played across his lips. Zarek turned to face him. "What is it?" he asked coolly. The man didn't answer. He simply kept smiling, gaze fixed on Zarek like a predator toying with its prey. Suddenly, Zarek's instinct screamed. A terrible premonition surged through him like lightning. But before he could react, bang! The shirtless man's fist smashed into him with merciless force. This time, however, Zarek was prepared. Zarek twisted his body at the last second, narrowly dodging the incoming fist. He countered with a punch of his own, landing a solid blow to the shirtless man's cheek. Bang! The man was sent flying through the air and crashed into the wall. Dust billowed out, cloaking the surroundings and impairing everyone's vision. Zarek took a deep breath, his mind growing calm and focused, poised in a fighting stance. He was ready to unleash hell at a moment's notice. Although his body wasn't yet accustomed to combat, he possessed the memories of others, along with the title Martial Apprentice. It was a title Chun Ma had earned when he first established his own dantian. Gang Ryond, however, couldn't obtain this title, as his dantian hadn't been forged through his own effort. It had formed on its own. The title was straightforward. It granted Zarek an instinctive understanding of martial arts, greatly enhancing his combat ability. With narrowed eyes, Zarek stared into the swirling dust ahead. He could sense the presence of a shirtless man lurking within. A sense of unease gripped Zarek, making his heart pound violently. Despite his punch landing cleanly, he was almost certain the man was unharmed. That certainty stemmed from what he knew. Level 9 telekinesis users could reinforce their skin with psychic energy, rendering them nearly immune to weak physical strikes. As expected, when the dust finally settled, the shirtless man stood almost completely unscathed. He twisted his neck in an unnatural way, a grin spreading across his face. "You little brat, you're interesting." "Am I interesting to you?" Zarek replied, his face blank. "That's right. Were you hiding your strength earlier?" the shirtless man said, cracking his knuckles. "If I hadn't used telekinesis to block that punch, my neck might have actually snapped." His grin stretched wide. Zarek narrowed his eyes, remaining silent. A strange tension filled the air, a storm before the calm. The shirtless man struck first. His figure vanished in an instant, leaving afterimages in his wake from sheer speed as he lunged at Zarek with a powerful punch. Zarek responded in kind, meeting the attack with a brutal fist of his own. The impact was deafening, the force so immense it could have ruptured eardrums in an instant. To the shirtless man's surprise, the force behind Zarek's punch was overwhelming. It completely overpowered him, and bit by bit, he was pushed back. Zarek didn't let up. He drove his knee into the man's face, forcing him to stagger even further. Without pause, Zarek followed up with a spinning roundhouse kick that smashed into the man's cheek. Blood began to trickle down from the shirtless man's face. He tried to counter, but Zarek moved like a shadow, his speed far too fast for the eye to follow. In the next instant, the shirtless man felt a sharp blow slam into his right shin. The strength in his leg vanished instantly, and he nearly collapsed from the sudden loss of balance. Naturally, Zarek didn't waste the opportunity. He ruthlessly kicked the man's left leg, sending him crashing to the ground in helpless defeat. Zarek raised his leg, preparing to slam his heel down onto the man's head, but he suddenly felt resistance. "No fair, old man. You're using telekinesis," Zarek muttered. The shirtless man said nothing. Cold sweat streamed down his forehead, his eyes wide with a horror that bordered on panic. Zarek responded by launching a telekinetic attack of his own, but the moment it collided with the man's defenses, it shattered instantly. Pain exploded in his head, veins bulging as he clenched his teeth from the backlash. Unlike before, Zarek didn't scream or roar in pain. He simply stood there, silent and still, like an unshakable force. Then he felt it, a strange shift in his bloodline. His telekinesis suddenly regenerated, not just healed, but stronger than before. A blue prompt appeared before his eyes. "You have adapted to the shattering of your telekinesis. Your exclusive skill, telekinesis, has leveled up from level 5 to 6. Renewed and empowered, Zarek launched another telekinetic attack against the shirtless man's telekinetic barrier. This time, it didn't shatter upon impact. Instead, his upgraded telekinesis clashed with the man's defense, grinding against it with pressure. Bit by bit, cracks began to form. Finally, a small hole appeared in the barrier. Zarek's telekinesis had held long enough to force a breakthrough, though it left him completely drained in the process. Zarek immediately seized the opening, driving his fist through the weakened gap in the shirtless man's defenses. His punch landed squarely against the man's ribs. A sickening creak echoed out as bones began to crack under the force. I got hit." The man gasped in disbelief, confusion flooding his face. His shaken mental state disrupted his control further, and the remnants of his telekinetic shield weakened drastically, leaving him completely exposed. Zarek didn't hesitate. His fists and kicks rained down like a relentless storm, each blow landing with ruthless precision. The shirtless man was completely overwhelmed, forced to his knees. "I still remember my state just the day before yesterday, clear as daylight, old man," Zarek said coldly, stepping on a man's face. "I guess the tables turned quicker than you expected." With those words, Zarek slammed his foot down mercilessly onto the shirtless man. "You brat," the man began, his voice rising in a furious roar. But Zarek was faster. His hand flashed forward, delivering a sharp chop to the back of the man's neck. The shirtless man collapsed instantly, unconscious. "I shouldn't give an enemy a chance to strike," Zarek muttered inwardly, a flicker of fear lingering in his chest. The moment the man had roared, his instincts had screamed at him in alarm. He knew, if he had hesitated, even for a breath, the tables could have turned faster than before. Zarek slowly raised his head, his gaze sweeping over the crowd around him. They stared back, wide-eyed and stunned into silence. Though it felt like an eternity had passed, in truth, it had only been a matter of moments before Zarek completely overwhelmed the shirtless man, a level 9 telekinetic human. They were still deep within the mines, and everyone present was scared out of their wits. A prisoner has defeated the warden. How could this monster defeat a level 9 telekinetic human so easily? "This is bad, really bad." The prisoners murmured in shock, their eyes wide as they stared at the long, golden-haired youth standing before them. The guards had already begun turning to flee, scrambling away in panic. "Contact the Grand Warden and the others, now." They split in different directions. If we scatter, even if those monsters catch some of us, they won't catch all of us. But contrary to their expectations, Zarek didn't chase. He simply stood still, his cold eyes fixed on the fleeing guards, void of emotion, sharp as blades. Instead, he shrugged with nonchalant indifference and turned his gaze toward the prisoners standing before him. His cold, boundless blue eyes swept across the crowd. Wherever his gaze landed, a chill ran down spines. None could explain the dread they felt, only that their bodies trembled under his sheer gaze. "What? Afraid already?" he scoffed, his voice as cold as ice. "Kneel." "Yes." One by one, the prisoners dropped to their knees, collapsing under the overwhelming fear that radiated from Zarek like an oppressive storm. There were certainly a few unruly ones, prisoners who still clung to the idea of resisting Zarek's overwhelming presence. But under the weight of his cold, boundless blue eyes and the unmistakable, unmatched power he had just displayed, instinct took over. The instinct to survive. One by one, even the defiant fell to their knees. In the end, every prisoner in the mine knelt, like subjects before a newly crowned emperor. Zarek stood motionless, his expression unreadable. His icy gaze swept over them all one final time. Then his eyes shifted toward the shirtless man. "Since you spared me once," he said calmly, "I will spare you once. But if we meet again on the battlefield, it will be your end." With that, Zarek turned his gaze back to the sea of kneeling prisoners. He could see through the true nature of these people with ease, discerning them for what they really were. Still, a faint sense of regret lingered in Zarek's heart. Although he had established his mana core, he had yet to form his first circle. He was but a mere mage acolyte. "Oh well, at least I can use any spell freely," he thought, but that's not exactly practical in combat. He extended his hand, his mind swirling with intent. Slowly, deliberately, he formed the image of fire in his thoughts. It took several minutes before a small flame finally flickered to life in his palm. Without pre-established spells, he sighed inwardly, magic is practically useless in battle. Regardless, he shifted his focus back to the prisoners. They were visibly confused as they watched the small fireball flicker in Zarek's hand. Is he a pyromancer? A person who can conjure fire? That has to be it. A mutant among the telekinetic users. Their whispers were hushed, but not a single word escaped Zarek's ears. His brow twitched. So did his ears. "Mutant telekinetic user," he muttered coldly. He raised his pupils, and without a single step forward, one of the kneeling prisoners suddenly floated upward, suspended by nothing. His gaze sharpened, eyes glowing faintly as his telekinesis took hold. "Tell me," he said in a low, menacing voice, "what do you mean by that?" "Ah." The prisoner froze, stunned. Zarek shifted his pupils slightly, and the man drifted forward, drawn in by invisible force, until he hovered right in front of him. "Tell me everything you know about mutant telekinetic users," Zarek commanded coldly. He had never heard of such a term, not even through the vast knowledge inherited from Draken. That could only mean one thing. This was a secret unknown even to the dragon cult among humans. But somehow, mere prisoners spoke of it so casually. That didn't sit right with him. His sharp gaze landed on the man who had first spoken the words, a prisoner with white hair and a scruffy, patchy beard. There was nothing remarkable about him. In fact, he looked entirely average, hardly the kind of person to be holding secrets beyond the reach of Dragonkin intelligence. As the prisoner was lifted into the air, his limbs flailed helplessly. Panic flashed in his eyes, and it took several seconds for his mind to fully process what was happening. "Tell me everything about the mutant telekinetic users," Zarek said coldly, his gaze narrowing, eyes focusing on a man's neck. In an instant, the prisoner felt an invisible force tighten around his throat. A crushing pressure gripped him, making it hard for him to even breathe. His mouth hung open as saliva dripped down his chin, his body trembling from the suffocating weight. "I'll talk. I'll tell you everything," he gasped out with great effort. The pressure vanished immediately, and he dropped to the ground, now kneeling before Zarek, his chest heaving. "Speak," Zarek ordered. Yes, yes. I overheard it when one of the guards had guests over. The prisoner said quickly, not daring to hesitate. You overheard it? Zarek raised a brow, his expression unreadable. A secret like that, revealed so easily, it didn't sit right with him. Yeah, I still remember that day. The prisoner continued, nodding furiously. A little brat with green hair came by, must have been one of the higher-ups' kids. He looked at us like we were animals in a cage, snickering and giggling like it was all a game. He pointed at us and ran his mouth like a damn chatterbox. Zarek said nothing, only stared, listening. He said they were researching something called bloodline evolution. Said they were messing with human genetics, which causes the telekinesis to mutate into something like your ability. The prisoner hurriedly spoke. I see, Zarek nodded slowly. The information was invaluable to Draken. Now, the dragons could prepare accordingly. For the time being, maintaining the delicate balance between dragons and humans was the most profitable path. If either side gained too much power too quickly, the scales would tip. Though it seemed as if the dragons were currently dominating, Zarek knew the truth. The world was vast, and the human population dwarfed that of the dragons. If even half of humanity's true strength were united, it could mark the extinction of the dragon race. He would have to tread carefully, growing Draken's influence from the shadows while he causes trouble on the human side. Zarek's gaze swept over the prisoners once more. A faint smile curled the corner of his lips. They're perfect for causing chaos. At that moment, every prisoner felt a chill crawl down their spine. Zarek's gaze, cold, swept over them like a blade, merciless and absolute. No one dared to meet his eyes. They trembled. You're going to obey my orders, right? Zarek's voice was calm. Why, yeah. The prisoners replied in shaky unison, uncertainty thick in their voices. Zarek narrowed his eyes. I can't hear you. Yes, they shouted, louder this time, driven by fear, desperation, and the instinct to survive. The guards fled through the winding passageways, glancing back anxiously to see if the monster was in pursuit. When they saw Zarek hadn't followed, they let out a collective sigh of relief. They pressed onward until they reached a control room, a space filled with countless monitors, each displaying scenes from across the mines. One screen showed exactly what Zarek was doing. Head Warden. Immediately, all of them bowed deeply to a woman seated on a throne. Her long green hair fluttered softly, and her eyes never left the screen. She said nothing at first, her gaze fixed on the golden-haired man through the screen. This man, what exactly is he? Zarek's gaze suddenly shifted to the screen, his piercing blue pupils seeming to stare straight through it, into the woman's very soul. He raised his hand and pointed. Instantly, the screen went black. The signal was lost. The hummingbird had been killed by Zarek. The long, green-haired woman tapped her fingers on the armrest of her throne, deep in thought. After a brief pause, she clapped her hands once. Footsteps echoed from beyond the chamber. One by one, figures entered, stepping onto the floor with calm precision and stern eyes. Go test his strength, she commanded. I want to see if he truly grows stronger the more he fights. When they first encountered him, he had shown the power of a level 4 telekinetic. Then, after a short while, he suddenly exhibited the strength of level 5. At first, they considered the possibility that Zarek had simply hidden his strength. But upon closer inspection, it was clear he was already at level 5. However, a level 5 telekinetic couldn't even dream of standing against a level 9. His telekinesis has at least reached level 6, and with the densest frequency we've ever recorded. She watched silently as the wardens departed, their mission clear: confront and eliminate Zarek. If he truly grows stronger with every battle, he'll become a terrifying threat to our empire. No, we must turn him into an ally. But we don't know his nature. Would he even accept such an offer? Her long green hair swayed gently as she stood, retrieved a piece of parchment, and began writing with a pen. Once she finished writing, she folded the paper and handed it to a hamster spinning in circles inside a small cage. The hamster took the note, bowed respectfully, then exited the prison chamber. At the doorway, it turned and gave her one final salute before disappearing down the corridor. Oomph. I have to rely on a hamster because all other forms of communication are disrupted here, she muttered, rubbing her forehead as she closed her eyes. You may have destroyed the hummingbird, but you cannot escape my telekinesis, brat. Her telekinetic power surged from her body and slipped silently out of the room, weaving through the air alongside the marching soldiers. As a telekinesis master, there's no limit to the distance my power can reach. In the mine, the heavy thuds of pickaxes striking the walls echoed endlessly, their force so great it made the very ground tremble. Everyone was mining with relentless effort. No one paused, not even for a breath. Zarek was among them, driving his pickaxe into the rock with mechanical intensity. He had already extracted over 100 ores. The sheer speed and force of his work caused violent vibrations that broke his body several times. But each time, he recovered stronger than before. His resilience grew with every shock, his body hardening with each cycle of destruction and regeneration. His goal was clear: to adapt his body to such an extreme that it would one day become invincible. That would be the ideal outcome. The only problem is my telekinesis, Zarek muttered to himself. To make it stronger, I'll have to face increasingly powerful opponents so they can adapt. His adapt skill might seem invincible on the surface, but it had a glaring weakness. If there were no stronger foes to push him beyond his limits, or if he were crushed outright, the skill would stagnate. He needed to find an optimal solution. For once, I want to break the restriction that stops my telekinesis from leveling up. This was the first major obstacle in his path. If he wished to attain true invincibility, he had to overcome this limitation, no matter what it took. Zarek's thoughts inevitably drifted to Draken, the one who possessed a telekinesis serum. Although Draken himself might not be able to consume it or gain any benefit, Zarek believed it could be perfect for him. Even if something went wrong, he could simply adapt. As he pondered this, a group of prisoners approached, carrying glowing latinium in their hands. "Master, this is all the latinium we managed to retrieve from the storage," one of them said. Zarek turned toward them, his eyes falling on the gem-like crystals. There were thousands, each one gleaming with latent energy. He gave a small nod of approval. Not bad. Then, without hesitation, he gathered the latinium he had mined along with what the prisoners had brought, placing it all into a massive bag. By weight, it was at least 400 kilograms. Even Zarek couldn't help but take a heavy breath under the sheer weight of the bag. Step by step, he moved forward, each footfall causing the ground to tremble slightly. The prisoners followed behind, silent and orderly, as they made their way to a chamber adjacent to the mine. The moment they entered, an oppressive heat greeted them. Sweat poured down their bodies instantly in the sweltering air. Zarek dropped the heavy bag of latinium onto the ground with a thud and addressed the prisoners already working inside. "Smell all of this?" "Yes, sir," replied the white-haired prisoner, the same one who had previously informed him about the mutant telekinetic user. Without hesitation, he and the others got to work. The latinium was quickly loaded into the smelting furnaces, and as it melted into magma, the molten liquid shimmered with an eerie green hue. The molten latinium was carefully poured into a reinforced container, one built to withstand extreme heat. The white-haired prisoner turned to Zarek and asked, "How would you like your weapon to be, Master Zarek?" "A hammer," Zarek replied without hesitation. Then, after a brief pause, he added, "A giant one." The white-haired prisoner blinked in surprise. "A giant hammer?" Zarek nodded with his voice firm. "That's right, a giant hammer." The wardens all traveled in a row with great discipline, resembling the military, as they advanced where Zarek was. The place of the control room and where the mining was actually quite far away, and since they went at a steady pace, the time taken was even longer. However, they didn't have any worry in their hearts, because to go outside, they would have to take this path in the end. By the time they were about to reach the mining area, a long golden-haired youth with a hammer in his hand stood in their way. smiling gracefully at them. Because they were all jumbled up, the wardens who were behind couldn't see the situation in front of them, so they roared. "Who are you?" "You fools! He is Zarek, the criminal who dared to destroy the face of the Empire and now has even injured a warden. His sin is almost unforgivable." Listening to these voices, Zarek shook his head. The hammer he was holding weighed around 200 kilograms, and if he used his full strength, one could only imagine how powerful a single strike would be. Thinking about it, he felt a little excited to use it. But won't they die if I use it? This thought appeared, making him hesitate a little. His personality wasn't that of a cold-blooded killer. As a person with a modern mindset, of course, he had hesitation in killing, even if it was his enemy. Still, his body moved before his mind could catch up. He lunged towards them, leaping into the air with his arms raised, ready for his hammer to strike without mercy. Even before it landed, the sheer force of his hammer tore through the air, and it felt like the entire ground was about to be crushed. Every warden's expression immediately paled when they saw this. The looming shadow of the hammer descending upon them truly felt like death itself. The 5 wardens about to be smitten by the hammer were the most pale, their bodies trembling violently just as it was about to descend upon them. At that moment, their lives flashed before their eyes. However, at the nick of time, they instinctively covered their bodies with telekinesis as the hammer came down. Bang! A terrifying shockwave rippled outward, knocking the other wardens away. Dust rose from the ground, almost completely obscuring the surroundings. Without waiting for the dust to settle, Zarek moved with swiftness, his purple hammer glowing with the telekinetic power he channeled into it as it descended on 3 people. Another ripple spread outward, knocking everyone off balance as they lost their footing. Acceleration, dash. Zarek moved even faster, his hammer bearing down like the apocalypse. With each slam of his hammer, at least 3 to 5 wardens at level 9 were knocked unconscious almost instantly. Although their bodies were protected by their telekinetic power, the sheer impact was something they simply couldn't withstand. Zarek was fast and brutal. He didn't give them a chance to catch their breath, let alone think logically. For these level 9 telekinetic users, this might be a nightmare, the glowing purple hammer descending upon them, something that would give them PTSD for eternity. By the time Zarek finally calmed down, there was almost no one standing before him. They were all unconscious. Zarek had defeated a group of at least 20 level 9 telekinetic users. Looking at his trembling hands, his eyes shone with sheer excitement. He plopped to the ground and shouted with all his heart, "I did it!" Although he didn't feel physically exhausted, mentally he did. In fact, his body had been slightly strengthened from carrying the hammer because of his adapt skill, adapting his body to the toll of carrying the hammer. Gripping his hammer, a flicker of excitement appeared in his heart. This really is an optimal weapon for mass destruction. Zarek immediately stood up after a moment of rest, turned around, and called out, "Come here." Yes. All the prisoners began to emerge in an orderly manner, looking at Zarek with even more fear in their eyes. In front of him, they truly felt as if they were standing before a demon king. "Good that you become more obedient." Zarek nodded in satisfaction and pointed at the fallen wardens. "Loot their stuff and give all the valuables to me. You can keep the armor and other things." "Yes." "Good that you're replying with yes and no. Only reply to me with those answers from now on. Got it?" "Yes." They shouted in unison and began looting the fallen soldiers until they were completely but naked. First, they showed the loot to Zarek, and he took the valuables before the prisoners started wearing the clothes of the soldiers. "Oh, not bad. Considering I looted one of the level 9s previously, it seems that you guys are properly equipped and ready for battle." "Yeah." The prisoners were immediately frightened when they heard this. Some, however, were excited, licking their weapons with bloodthirst. At that moment, Zarek suddenly gazed in a certain direction and narrowed his eyes instantly. He spread his telekinesis and launched an attack in that direction. Immediately, a tearing pain erupted in his head as his telekinesis was destroyed and blue veins bulged across his forehead. However, he didn't let up. He used telekinesis again after recovering for a moment. Again, his telekinesis was destroyed. Zarek tried for the third time, and once again his telekinesis was shattered. The pain from having it destroyed was soul-rending. However, suddenly his telekinesis recovered and grew even stronger. A blue prompt appeared in front of him once more. Even without looking at it, Zarek knew. I have reached level 7 telekinetic power. At the same time, he could feel that his telekinetic power had undergone a major transformation. Not only had it gotten stronger, but it had also become powerful enough for him to form a protective layer against external attacks. However, this wasn't very useful for Zarek, who could already break through the barriers of even level 9 users. But now, his hammer's attack power could become even more devastating thanks to the boost in his telekinesis. Still, that lingering telekinetic presence remained. Without hesitation, Zarek began to clash with it, using his own telekinesis, shattering it again and again upon impact. To his surprise, when he attacked it for the 6th time, it was still holding strong. All the while, he had to endure the grueling pain of having his telekinesis destroyed and his entire world disoriented while feeling the hallucination. A blue prompt appeared again, and his telekinesis recovered instantly, stronger than ever. Level 8 Telekinetic Human. Zarek had already been advancing through the levels of telekinetic humans without even knowing a genuine method to do so. And from what he understood, this was the most powerful path to raise his mental level. Telekinesis, level 8, cannot be leveled up, allows the user to exert a force of 80 kilograms within a range of 80 meters using only their mind. As far as he could tell, only those with a perfect foundation could reach the true limits of their telekinetic level. Otherwise, the ceiling would be lower. I can't say for sure, he muttered, but based on what Draken found, even an ordinary level 9 telekinetic typically only manages about 77 kilograms of force and a distance of 80 meters. Now that he had almost surpassed that level, it meant he was technically stronger than most ordinary level 9 telekinetic users, at least in terms of raw strength. However, that wasn't the only way to measure the power of a telekinetic. Their true strength also depended heavily on their weapons and armor. Just like how he had been able to annihilate all those level 9 wardens, thanks to the sheer might of his hammer alone. Latinium cost a fortune on the outside. Assembling even a small amount required one to bleed from their pockets. And to forge an entire hammer out of latinium? That was something only the king, or someone in the highest ranks, could afford to do. Without this hammer, it was safe to say that he couldn't even have the strength to defeat even one level 9 telekinetic human here. While thoughts rapidly whizzed through his head, he sensed that the telekinetic power was still there, persistently keeping it here. Zarek could feel someone's prying gaze upon him through this telekinesis that was in front of him. A telekinetic master. His expression was stern and serious as he spread his telekinesis outward again and attacked it. This time, it lasted longer than he expected before his telekinesis shattered without mercy. Zarek again used his telekinesis to attack it, enduring the pain that was greater than before. Although, with his level up, his telekinesis got a lot stronger. However, with it, when it shattered, the pain also increased in the same ratio. He tightened his fist as his telekinesis shattered again and again. His eyes started to bleed blood, and his entire world was completely blurry and disoriented. Zarek roared and grabbed his t-shirt before tearing it apart in almost an instant, almost completely going berserk from the pain as his telekinesis continued to be shattered. 10 times. It has already been shattered 10 times, but his telekinesis hasn't evolved, while his pain has increased by multiple folds. Still, Zarek continued nonetheless while muttering in his mind, "If I have to endure such pain whenever I have to increase my telekinesis level, then I will really go insane one day." With each rise in his level, the pain intensified. That meant he had to endure all of it every time. It was the kind of agony that felt like his nerves were being fried from the inside out. Just imagining it sent a chill down Zarek's spine. But his thoughts were ripped away once more as his telekinesis shattered again. 15 times. 18 times. Damn it, just level up, he growled, grinding his teeth, his body drenched in blood, covered in countless wounds. A pool of crimson spread beneath him from the sheer scale of his injuries. His eyelids drooped, and the tearing pain in his head had reached the threshold of madness. 20 times. Suddenly, a blue prompt appeared before him. You have leveled up your telekinesis from level 8 to level 9. In an instant, his telekinesis surged back, stronger than ever. Zarek collapsed to the ground, barely conscious. If I had to endure it one more time, I'd be dead, he thought, his body's regeneration kicking in. But his healing wasn't like Draken's. They might share the same skill, but the speed of a dragon's regeneration was monstrous, and combined with the skill, it was safe to say he could even recover instantly. Meanwhile, the prisoner's eyes were on the fallen figure of Zarek. Their gazes had shifted, subtle. If we strike him now, will he die? Idiot! Did you not see how strong his body is? Can we even hurt him? If we use the weapons we took from the wardens, we can definitely injure him. But what if he's faking it? What if he hasn't passed out yet? They whispered among themselves, voices low but laced with anticipation. These were criminals, after all. Could people like them truly change overnight? Even if he had saved them? Morals? Ethics? Some of them had never known such things. And so, without hesitation, a few of the prisoners stepped forward, breaking away from the group. Slowly, cautiously, they began to approach Zarek. When he didn't react, they exhaled in relief and hurried their steps. They raised their weapons, ready to bring them down and end Zarek's life. But at that moment, his eyes snapped open, cold, piercing blue. Just as the blade began to fall, he spoke, voice calm and chilling. So, you finally showed your true colors. The prisoners froze, literally suspended in midair, helpless as Zarek slowly rose to his feet. He sighed. I won't kill you, but I won't spare you either. A sharp crack echoed. Then another. Bone after bone began to break within their floating bodies, the sound of snapping joints and cracking limbs filling the air. By the end, they were left hanging with mangled bodies and barely conscious. Zarek sighed and shook his head. His focus again shifted towards the telekinesis of the telekinetic master, which still persisted through all this. He extended his hand, about to attack, but paused in place. In the end, he didn't want to feel this pain again, and even on a higher scale, it might really drive him insane. Sigh, I have to do it, Zarek murmured like a madman as he was about to extend his telekinesis. But before he could, the energy dissipated. The oppressive pressure vanished. In its place, soft footsteps echoed in the silence. Zarek turned his gaze forward. A woman was approaching, slowly, confidently. Her long green hair fluttered behind her like trailing leaves in the wind, and with each step, a strange calm. Who are you? Zarek narrowed his eyes. He felt like he had seen this woman before, but he couldn't quite pinpoint where. Then it clicked. He had seen her in Draken's memories, back when he'd received photos of all the important figures from the Dragon King. That green hair. Yes, it had to be her. Before he could speak, the prisoners were already trembling. Their faces turned paler than paper, and some looked ready to kneel. The Princess of Carnage. What is she doing here? Princess of Carnage? Zarek echoed. As he heard the prisoner's words, the pieces in his mind fell into place. Instinctively, he muttered her details. The woman who stepped onto 1,000 battlefields and killed thousands of humans. Whenever she appeared, she struck fear into both enemy and ally alike. A ruthless killer, third princess of the Ragnarok Empire, and considered the strongest among the telekinetic masters, Melissa, the Princess of Carnage. Oh, you know about me? Melissa raised a brow, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. Of course I know you. Everyone knows the Princess of Carnage. Zarek lied through his teeth. He'd only recognized her because of Draken's memories. Oomph. Melissa scoffed, a glint of disdain in her eyes. Then why have you not kneel? Why should I? Zarek narrowed his eyes, his grip tightening around the hammer in his hand. Honestly, he was a little scared, but at the same time, excited. The corner of his mouth couldn't help but curl upward. As long as she doesn't kill me outright, I'll have the chance to reach her level and end her. She wasn't just any telekinetic master. She was said to be the strongest. Zarek couldn't help but feel curious about her abilities. Melissa remained silent, her eyes locked on his. She studied him for a moment, as if trying to peer into his soul. A strange tension began to build in the air. A heavy, suffocating silence settled over the room, pressing down on everyone like a weight. The prisoners watched in utter stillness, not daring to speak or even swallow. One prisoner even felt an unspeakable urge to poop, but barely managed to hold himself together, trembling from the sheer tension. If this went on any longer, it was safe to say he'd be dealing with constipation for days. Still, he felt it was worth it just to witness the showdown between Zarek and Melissa. It's definitely worth it. Worth it. He prayed silently, over and over. Meanwhile, Zarek and Melissa continued to stare each other down. The air felt like it could ignite at any second. Then, just when it seemed like the battle would erupt, Melissa smiled and began to laugh. Zarek, to everyone's shock, laughed with her at the exact same moment. Their laughter echoed through the room, bouncing off the walls. Everyone froze in place, stunned and confused, unsure whether they were about to witness a duel or not. "What are they doing?" the poor guy on the verge of constipation muttered, his face twisted in bewilderment. He wasn't alone. Nearly every prisoner wore the same flabbergasted expression, staring at Zarek and Melissa, who were laughing for no apparent reason. "Weren't they about to fight?" another prisoner asked, rubbing his bald head in disbelief. The laughter only lasted a moment before both Zarek and Melissa abruptly stopped. Their backs straightened as they looked at each other with renewed focus. "Why did you laugh?" Melissa asked, tilting her head slightly. A flicker of confusion danced in her eyes. "Because you laughed," Zarek replied with a casual shrug. Then he asked, "Why did you laugh?" "Because I found something funny." "I see. Well, I laughed because I found your laugh funny." Melissa stared at him, eyes narrowing. Her voice turned sharp, serious. "Do you really dare to joke with the strongest telekinetic master? Are you a telekinetic grandmaster?" Zarek asked casually, picking his ear without a care. "No," Melissa replied calmly. "You might be the strongest master," Zarek said as he blew the dust off his fingertip. "But in front of a grandmaster, you wouldn't stand a chance. You're just someone too afraid to take the next step." Melissa fell silent. Her face went blank, expressionless. Then, without a word, she slowly raised her hand and pointed directly at Zarek. But Zarek was ready. He lifted his hammer, aiming it toward her, his body already wrapped in a layer of telekinetic energy. "Let's see the power of a telekinetic master," he thought with excitement. Bang! All hell broke loose. From Melissa's outstretched hand, a terrifying force erupted, like a storm with her at its epicenter. The floors cracked, the walls trembled. Dust and debris exploded in every direction, filling the air in a blinding cloud. At the heart of it all stood Zarek, bracing himself as he took the full force of the attack head-on. His hammer was the first to feel the pressure. Though it didn't break, Zarek's arm was violently shoved back, the sheer force threatening to rip it from his shoulder as it was flung hard into the air. Then pure, crushing telekinesis smashed through the defensive telekinesis Zarek had wrapped around himself, as if it were paper. At last, the telekinetic power slammed into his unprotected body with brutality. His body felt like a kite with its strings suddenly cut. Bones cracked, snapped, and shattered under the pressure. But he endured, standing tall with his back straight. Through the blinding pain, the ringing in his ears, and the weight threatening to tear him apart, Zarek persisted. He resisted with everything he had. The telekinetic force dragged him across the ground, his body carving a deep, jagged trail in the floor as he was pushed back. He only came to a stop when his back slammed against the wall with a loud crack. The telekinetic pressure still lingered, but its momentum had long since faded. Zarek coughed, then opened his mouth and roared, not in pain, but exhilaration. "Ha ha! I did it. He clenched his fist tightly, the strain making him wince as pain shot through his body. His shattered telekinetic barrier had taken its toll. But despite the agony, his eyes burned with excitement, because even now, his body was healing. And more than that, he was growing stronger. Oh, you actually took the blow. Melissa tilted her head, genuine surprise flashing in her eyes. Yeah, I took it. Zarek thumped his chest, then slammed his foot into the ground. Come on, hit me again if you've got the guts. Melissa paused, then the corner of her lips curled into a faint, dangerous smile. Are you sure? Zarek's instincts flared at hyperspeed. His heart pounded, and cold sweat broke out across his skin. In his vision, Melissa seemed to grow larger with every passing second, towering, overwhelming, like a force of nature. Then she spoke calmly. You have two options right now. One, join us. We'll give you a position worthy of your potential. And the other, she didn't finish her sentence. She didn't need to. Her eyes said it all. I refuse, Zarek said without missing a beat. Immediately, a looming shadow fell over him. He tilted his head to look at her. His heart palpitated instinctively, but in his mind, he felt no fear of her. His goal was clear: to adapt. He braced himself for Melissa's attack once again, but it never came. Confused, he slowly opened his eyes and looked at her with a slight tilt of his head. What are you scared of? Melissa asked with a chuckle. Of course not, Zarek replied honestly, shaking his head. But I was preparing for you to attack me again. You see, Melissa's figure vanished in an instant, then reappeared right in front of his eyes. Zarek's pupils dilated. He cursed inwardly. How fast is she? Melissa smiled as she spoke. We do not wish to be your enemies. Enemies? Zarek blinked, his gaze sharpening. What about how you said I stepped on the face of the Empire and couldn't be forgiven for my crimes? Those? Melissa chuckled. How could beating up a few corrupted guards be considered an insult to the Empire's dignity? The real reason you were captured was because of a power-hungry duke who wanted to flaunt his strength. I see. Zarek nodded, finally understanding. Melissa raised her hand and ruffled his hair. You're quite handsome, she said with a teasing smile. I wouldn't want to become the enemy of such a good-looking man, now, would I? Zarek's brows twitched in response, but he didn't say anything. She was stronger than him. If he were stronger, the tides would have shifted. What do you want? He asked. How about you join hands with the Empire? Melissa offered. We'll provide you with all the resources you need. In exchange, we become allies. Why would I want to ally with those who captured me? Zarek replied coldly. Besides, what would public opinion be if they found out someone who supposedly stomped on the face of the Empire was not only roaming free, but also allied with it? Wouldn't you be called cowards? Who dares? Melissa merely smiled as she heard his words. The public's minds are like sheep, Melissa said calmly. They follow whatever narrative the masses create. Those who think differently are always excluded. Besides, only the name Zarek is the prisoner here, isn't it? You want to change my identity? Zarek narrowed his eyes. That's right, she nodded. Enemies are temporary. Benefits are eternal. We'll provide you with all the resources you need. All you have to do is shake my hand. Melissa extended her hand toward him. Zarek looked at her slender, snow-like hand in near silence. After a moment, he finally spoke. All right. He extended his hand and shook hers. Welcome to the Ragnarok Empire, General Kane, Melissa grinned. Zarek nodded. But I have a condition first. Please tell me. I would never disappoint a general of my empire, Melissa replied with a smile. I want to attend the Dragon Hunting Festival, Zarek said, his eyes gleaming. Okay. Melissa shrugged nonchalantly. The Falcon Empire is 5 empires away from us. If we travel by horse, it would take several months to reach it. She smirked. However, I have a way for you to get there quickly. Oh, Zarek raised his brows, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. As a general of the Ragnarok Empire, you'll definitely have the opportunity, she said slowly. However, I cannot grant you the title of general so easily. Zarek's brow twitched. She was the one who offered the alliance and wanted to grant me the title of general, he thought. And now she says it's not so easy? She was speaking in two tones. Don't get me wrong, Melissa said, rubbing her forehead with helplessness. Even though I might be the strongest telekinetic master, even I can't break certain rules. You'll need some military merit to earn the title, so you'll have to enlist in the army. Zarek frowned at her words. Don't worry, she added with a sly smile. I'll make it easy for you to earn those exploits. How much time will it take? A week. Too long. I need it faster, Zarek said, shaking his head. Even Melissa hesitated for a moment, becoming thoughtful. I might be able to arrange enough military exploits for you in a single day, but it could be risky. Done. Zarek nodded with satisfaction. All right, she shrugged. Your choice. After that, everything was more or less settled. Honestly, Zarek had been planning to withdraw after some time. He knew there was no way he could defeat this telekinetic master so easily. But as it turned out, his luck was even better than expected. They had formed an alliance. With the power of the Ragnarok Empire behind him, Zarek's influence at the Dragon Hunting Festival would rise significantly, and he could assist Draken far more effectively. Not to mention, he had a cheat-like skill called Adapt. With everything settled, a few servants dressed in maid uniforms approached and guided him to a luxurious chamber. Melissa left after giving him a simple instruction. Just stay here until I return. The maids served him tea, and Zarek sank comfortably into the plush sofa, casually sipping from his cup. His nose twitched at the lingering aroma in the air. Ah, what a beautiful scent, he remarked. Even if the tea had been laced with poison or hallucinations, it wouldn't matter. His body would simply adapt. As expected, as he sipped the tea, his vision began to blur, but he quickly adapted to it. That woman, he thought, pausing for a moment, clicking his tongue before taking another sip. The maids watched him with expressionless faces, though he could hear their hearts pounding faster. Sigh, it's probably not their fault. I'll get even with Melissa, though. As he reflected, his mind cleared, shifting to thoughts about his exclusive telekinesis skill, a skill that couldn't be leveled up normally. It was truly confusing to him. As he slowly drank the refreshing tea, his tongue was flooded with flavor, and his mind grew serene, calm, and peaceful. Zarek had to admit, tea really did calm you down, while coffee was better for an instant boost of productivity. Luckily, in this world, both coffee and tea existed, though under different names, but he preferred to think of them that way. Still, his thoughts kept returning to the skill that was stuck, unable to be leveled up through normal means. His mind drifted back to the time he adapted to those waves of level 9 Valkyries and stood his ground. At that moment, he still remembered how his body and mind had adapted to the telekinesis. The soul, Zarek murmured. His body and mind might have adapted, and he had gained the strange power of the human bloodline in this world, but his soul was still missing. This realization came directly from the description of his adapt skill. Then another question surfaced. How do I make my soul adapt to it? The soul was illusionary, ethereal, and untouchable. How could something like that adapt? My only hope is the telekinetic serum in Draken's hands. Either way, he had to cross his fingers and hope for the best. He put down his third glass of tea, just as a maid quietly extended the tea set to pour him more. Zarek was about to take the tea when footsteps approached outside the room. Melissa entered. Is it done? Zarek asked. Yeah, as long as you take down one of our enemy's bases, you'll earn the general title, Melissa explained. But that place is guarded by 10 level 9 telekinetic users. Are you sure you can handle it? Didn't you see me take down all your wardens? Zarek shrugged confidently. The wardens didn't have any major weapons, Melissa said. Their only strength was raw telekinesis. Of course, you could beat them all with your hammer, made purely of latinium. But the soldiers guarding that base are war veterans, armed with powerful weapons forged from latinium. Are you sure you could take them on? Yeah. Zarek flexed his neck, a grin spreading across his face. Just show me the way. Okay. The sun beat down on a deserted, parched battlefield. A lingering scent of blood hung in the air, and dried crimson stains clung stubbornly to the cracked earth. Countless broken swords and shattered weapons, the remnants of the brave, lay scattered and ruined. This was the battlefield between the Ragnarok Empire and the Reinhardt Empire. The two mighty empires had clashed countless times over a bitter border dispute. Nearly equal in strength, neither side had ever dared to retreat, and their war had dragged on for centuries. With every passing year, the conflict only escalated. Though the battlefield lay silent now, it was the calm before the storm. At that moment, two figures gradually appeared atop the walls of Sun City, silently gazing out at the wasteland below. "This is the place, soldier," the man said, pointing ahead. "We've got intel that if you destroy that base over there, we can gain a stronger foothold." He indicated a small dot far off in the distance. "All right," Zarek replied, then asked, "I have a question. Why doesn't the base have any telekinetic masters guarding it?" "You haven't been told?" the man asked, confusion flashing in his eyes. Zarek silently shook his head. "It's because there's currently an agreement that no telekinetic master or above can intervene to minimize losses on both sides," the man explained with utmost seriousness. His cape fluttered in the wind, and medals dangled from his chest plate, one bearing the nameplate General Gerald. But judging by the situation, that agreement might not hold for much longer. "You have to be careful, soldier. I've seen many like you try and fail. Are you sure you'll be all right?" "Yeah." Zarek nodded, his golden hair rustling in the breeze as his eyes fixed silently on the distant. "Will you be striking at night?" General Gerald asked, though a hint of uncertainty lingered in his voice. "No," Zarek said. "I don't want to waste time. Is that all the information?" "Yes," General Gerald began, but his voice froze as the ground beneath them started to crack. Zarek crouched slightly. Even the weight of his powerful legs caused the ground to tremble. Then, in one swift motion, he leapt into the air and soared down onto the battlefield below, landing with astonishing ease. "Madman," General Gerald muttered, eyes fixed on the back of the youth with long golden hair and a hammer strapped to his back. Horror flickered across his face. "I doubted the Princess of Carnage, but he might really be able to kill them all." Zarek swiftly crossed the barren battlefield, heading toward the distant. His pace was relentless, his figure a mere blur as the dot grew larger and clearer ahead. He could faintly make out the shape of camps now. "I should be ruthless, right?" he thought. The weight of his hammer pressed heavily against his back, sending pressure through his body. Sweat trickled down his forehead. Yet with every step, every breath, his body recovered and grew stronger. "This skill is really broken. I need to level it up if I have enough destiny points," he mused silently. Finally, he arrived at the camp. Zarek leapt into the air, his hammer gripped tightly in both hands. With a roar, he hurled it down. Boom! The ground exploded beneath the impact, the shockwave rippling outward like an earthquake. Inside the camp, guards staggered, startled by the sudden tremor. Chaos erupted as they scrambled for their weapons. But when their eyes landed on the long, golden-haired youth standing amidst the dust, they hesitated, relief flashing across their faces. No telekinetic master could enter the battlefield. Even if the brat was a level 9, there was no need to fear. He's just one man. Attack! Dozens of soldiers raised their weapons. Battle cries echoing. Zarek stood still, calm amidst the chaos. Soldiers surrounded him, weapons raised, gleaming tips aimed directly at his heart. He said nothing. To him, they were mere pawns, fodder that he could obliterate with nothing more than a glance. And he wasn't exaggerating, but they weren't his goal. His true target was the level 9 telekinetic users. That was where the real challenge and the real thrill lay. A grin tugged at his lips. "Even if I lose, I won't die. And if I don't die, I'll adapt." This was the perfect scenario for him, one he intended to savor. His gaze locked onto a single soldier in the crowd. With a flicker of his will, Zarek activated his telekinesis. The soldier screamed as he was lifted high into the air, limbs flailing. Zarek's pupils narrowed, and a dreadful creak echoed through the battlefield, bone bending under his telekinesis. The soldier's limbs were mercilessly torn apart, one by one, arms and legs severed in an instant. He collapsed to the ground, helpless and broken. What is the power of 90 kilograms of raw strength? Enough to crush a normal person into a blood mist if he so willed to. He's a telekinetic user. The soldiers immediately roared, but they did not panic, as Zarek had expected. Instead, they instinctively stepped back. From the shadows ahead, a group of figures emerged slowly, stepping forward to confront him. At first glance, they looked like ordinary soldiers, but Zarek could sense the overwhelming telekinetic power radiating from them, even from a distance. They drew their weapons, mostly swords, one with a gun, and the last casually twirling a handful of knives. "Who's this brat? Dare to disturb my sleep?" The one with the gun sneered, grinning. "I'll make sure he dies a miserable death." Zarek said nothing, shaking his head in quiet disappointment. "I expected to face a level 9 telekinetic first. You lot are a big letdown." Without warning, he launched himself into the air, the sheer force of his legs propelling him upward. His hammer raised high, ready to come crashing down. Their faces hardened instantly. Even the pressure from that descending hammer alone could crush a normal man into pulp. But despite the overwhelming threat, they moved with surprising coordination, readying themselves to defend. The telekinetic user wielding knives raised his hands, causing each blade to levitate and spin rapidly in midair. The knives circled in front of everyone, forming a massive, whirling ring in the form of a deadly spinning O. The swirling blades generated a powerful electromagnetic force, creating an invisible shield shimmering before them. The telekinetic user with the gun took aim at Zarek's hammer and fired. But instead of bullets, a concentrated sphere of pure telekinetic energy burst from the muzzle, colliding violently with the descending hammer. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the air. Meanwhile, the sword-wielding telekinetics lunged forward, blades gleaming as they prepared to slice Zarek into pieces. Zarek sneered silently. As his hammer fell, it was like the coming of an apocalypse. The telekinetic bullets from the gun couldn't budge his hammer in the slightest. When the hammer struck the shield, it tore through it instantly. The sword-wielding telekinetic was forced to face the full force of the hammer head-on. As expected, the sword held only briefly before bending and shattering, telekinetic energy leaking from the broken blade. Their faces drained of color as the hammer landed. Boom! It was as if the earth itself shattered beneath the impact. Everything was thrown into chaos, the ground shaking like thunder. Dust billowed up, blurring the vision of the soldiers watching intently. When the dust finally settled, only one figure remained standing amidst the ruins. A young man stood amidst the ruin, long golden hair cascading down, piercing, boundless blue eyes fixed ahead, his hammer casually resting on his shoulders. The sword telekinetic users lay fallen across the battlefield, while the knife and gun users coughed up blood, their telekinetic power shattered. Zarek spoke a single word, dripping with cold contempt. "Weaklings." Just then, he felt a terrifying threat behind him. His instincts screamed at him to dodge, and that's exactly what he did, rolling across the ground before springing back up. The moment he took in the scene, his pupils nearly dilated. From his previous position, an arrow whizzed through the air, curving as it adjusted its trajectory toward him. Of course, this reaction wasn't triggered by that single arrow alone. Hundreds more followed, homing in on him like deadly missiles. A frown crept onto Zarek's brow as he tried to use his telekinesis to disrupt the barrage, but with so many arrows, he could only manage to deflect a handful. He clenched his hammer tightly, drawing his arm back to full stretch to build perfect momentum. At the same time, he channeled his telekinetic strength to amplify the hammer's force. Simultaneously, he activated one of his skills, synergy. In one powerful motion, he slammed the hammer into the ground. Telekinetic energy surged into the earth, sending dust swirling into the air. The arrows tore through the dust, only to be stopped by a wall that appeared out of thin air. This really does work. Zarek's eyes sparkled with excitement as he gazed at his creation, a towering wall standing firm before him. The wall held the arrows at bay, the metal shafts lodged halfway deep into its thick, meter-wide surface. Before he could react, two spinning knives sliced through the air, curving around the sides of the wall, aimed straight at him. Zarek barely spared them a glance, a smirk curling in his mind. He extended his hand, and his telekinetic power surged outward, halting the knives almost instantly. With a forceful push, he sent them flying backward, channeling all his strength into the attack. But at that moment, two figures clad in uniforms nearly indistinguishable from their surroundings crept up behind him. Their swords shimmered with telekinetic energy as they launched a sudden assault. Zarek sensed the danger just in time and rolled across the ground to dodge. But his movement inadvertently let go of the telekinetic grip holding back the spinning knives. The knives continued their arc, hurtling toward him with terrifying speed. "Damn it!" he growled through gritted teeth, still sliding across the dirt as the blades closed in fast. At the last possible moment, he summoned every ounce of willpower, forcing his telekinesis back to halt the knives mere inches from his face. He clenched his jaw in frustration. His frustration disrupted his focus, weakening his telekinetic control and leaving him vulnerable. That small window of opportunity was seized without hesitation. The spinning knives resumed its momentum, slicing deep into both of Zarek's arms, pinning him painfully to the ground. "Ah!" he roared, agony ripping through his body. The telekinetic energy pulsing through the blades intensified his wounds, blood pouring freely from the gashes. "Oof, you're nothing special, kid." One of the sword wielders, almost blending seamlessly into the shadows, sneered with a cruel smirk. "We're the best of the best. The Ragnarok Empire already sent a squad of 7 level 9 telekinetic users. None of them even satisfy the itch in my tooth." They laughed mockingly, like a pair of cliché 2D villains. "Hurry up, Endem," a sharp female voice called out from a distance. Fine." The two swordsmen muttered as they stepped forward, their blades shimmering with telekinetic energy, poised to strike the struggling Zarek. Suddenly, Zarek stopped screaming. His boundless blue pupils hardened, chilling and cold as they fixed on the approaching foes in complete silence. One swordsman sensed something was off, but it was too late. A fist glittering with starlight tore through the air, cracking the atmosphere itself. Zarek's punch struck with crushing force, its momentum carrying through and hitting his second opponent. Both were flung through the air, bodies bouncing and skidding across the barren ground for nearly 100 meters before lying still, motionless. His eyes then caught the volley of arrows hurtling straight toward him. Without hesitation, he grabbed his hammer from the ground and slammed it down at the ground with a thunderous crash. Using the impact as leverage, he propelled himself upward, narrowly evading the storm of arrows. His gaze sharpened, scanning the battlefield. With calculated precision, he raised his hammer high into the sky and swung it down toward a specific spot while falling, completely unfazed by the incoming homing arrows. Just as his hammer was about to crash down, a figure suddenly appeared, a woman clad in a sleek black kunoichi outfit, her face obscured behind a mask that made her eyes nearly impossible to discern. "Found you, spinning knives woman," Zarek muttered, aiming his strike straight for her head. In a blur, she twisted her body with unnatural agility, using the air itself as a stepping stone to narrowly evade the blow. Bang! The hammer grazed her back, making her wince as she tumbled across the ground before collapsing. "Oh, miss!" Zarek raised an eyebrow in surprise, though he knew better than to focus on her now. He moved with lightning speed, narrowly dodging the homing arrows that would have shredded his hand to pieces. With a heavy slam, his hammer crashed into the ground again. Closing his eyes, he tuned into the vibrations rippling through the earth. "Found you!" His eyes snapped open in an instant, and he surged forward with terrifying speed. As he sliced through the air, a chill ran down his spine. Glancing upward, Zarek spotted two figures hovering above, each standing on what looked like floating skateboards. They gripped chains that glowed faintly blue, swooping down with the precision like hungry hawks ready to strike. They came too fast. Zarek barely had time to react before his legs were ensnared in glowing chains. He crashed to the ground with a heavy thud, the bitter taste of dirt filling his mouth. "Caught you, little monster," one of them sneered. The chains were thrown with grace, binding even his hands tightly once more. "Tisk!" Zarek struggled, writhing to break free, but despite his strength, the chains held firm. These chains are reinforced with telekinesis and forged from the strongest materials. "Even I can't break them." Zarek's mind raced, eyes flickering with cold clarity as he analyzed every detail of his predicament. Before he could react further, a storm of arrows descended like a curtain of death. Thud! His body slammed into the ground once more, pinned down as if nailed to the earth itself. Hundreds of arrows tore through his flesh, puncturing muscle, tendon, and bone alike. Blood spurted in every direction, pooling rapidly beneath him. His body twitched, convulsing with a brutal impact. Steam rose from his wounds. But he didn't scream. He didn't even groan. "Is he?" The female shinobi asked, her voice laced with uncertainty as she stepped cautiously closer. The two on the flying skateboards landed nearby, as one of them shrugged. Who could survive that? The three stared at the motionless, bloodied figure on the ground. 5 armored men emerged from the bushes, their wary gazes fixed silently on Zarek. What kind of monster is he? He recovered from 2 wounds and even managed to contest her telekinesis over that rotating wall. Those were manageable, but his body, it's far too strong. If he were a telekinetic body user, his telekinesis wouldn't be this stable. "What about that huge wall over there?" the female shinobi asked, pointing to the massive structure Zarek had summoned with a slam of his hammer. "It looks like magic, but aren't only dragons supposed to use magic?" A heavy silence fell over the group. Then, a crack echoed through the air. "Ah!" All eyes instantly turned to Zarek. They stared in stunned silence as muscles bulged beneath Zarek's clothes, and the chains began to snap with sharp, crisp cracks. Slowly, Zarek rose to his feet, gradually freeing himself from the bindings, and stretched his body with a satisfied sigh. Veins popped all over his body, and his muscles swollen and inflated. Then his muscles twitched rapidly, and one by one, the arrows embedded in his flesh fell to the ground. His wounds healed, leaving him stronger than before. Then Zarek cracked his neck, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "Time for round 2. This. The shinobi's eyes were wide with disbelief. All of them attacked in an instant, driven by instinct. Something deep within screamed that if they didn't strike now, they'd be dead the next moment. The shinobi hurled 2 more spinning, curved knives, expertly guiding them with her telekinesis. Arrows rained from the sky as the 5 armored men stood their ground, shielding the shinobi. Meanwhile, the 2 on flying skateboards rose back into the air. Zarek merely shook his head, disappointment etched on his face. "Well, this seems boring," he murmured, extending a hand forward as his telekinesis surged toward the armored men. They immediately pushed back, resisting his power with all their might. However, they were completely overwhelmed. Zarek's telekinesis was the densest at level 9. It was quite literally the limit of what level 9 could achieve. In the same level, it was basically impossible for anyone to have a higher telekinetic strength than him. Even if there was a fraction of possibility that there was, it would only be equal to him. At the same time, arrows rained down, and knives closed in on him. "He's dead," the shinobi muttered through gritted teeth. The attack struck without hesitation. Countless spinning knives, carrying terrifying momentum, all landed upon him. But, to everyone's absolute horror, Zarek stood unharmed. Zarek spoke with a wicked grin. "Is that all you can do?" His voice was calm, almost friendly, but to those present, there was nothing short of horror in those words. At that moment, a chill ran down everyone's spine. It felt as if a demon had descended straight from the depths of hell. Zarek moved in a blur. In the blink of an eye, he appeared before the armored men and slammed his fist toward them, his knuckles glittering with starlight. His speed was beyond their perception, far too fast for even their eyes to follow. It was already too late to form a telekinetic defense. The first man to take the full brunt of Zarek's strike had his chest crushed inward, his armor shattering like glass under the sheer force. Zarek moved like a reaper, cutting down the four armored men with terrifying speed and precision. From above, two men on floating skateboards swooped down, attempting to bind his arms and legs with chains. But Zarek caught the chains just in time. Grinning, he said, "The same trick won't work twice." With a powerful yank, he pulled the chains, and the two men crashed down from their boards, slamming into the ground. A volley of arrows followed, but they were now completely useless. Not a single one could pierce his skin. Zarek began walking toward the two fallen men, slow and deliberate. Reaching them, he delivered a brutal kick to each, breaking what little resistance they had left. Their bodies went limp, collapsing flat on the ground. "How are the two of you doing?" Zarek turned toward the shinobi and the distant figure who had been firing arrows at him. "Maybe I'll get a reward if I bring you in alive." As he spoke, the shinobi suddenly leapt back, shouting with all her strength, "Soldiers of the Empire, stand and fight. Protect us." Reluctantly, the distant soldiers stepped forward, forming a line to block Zarek's path. Their eyes were filled with fear, staring at him as if he were some kind of monster. No one wanted to throw their life away for nothing. Even the most loyal among them hesitated. After all, dying without earning even a sliver of merit was a fate no soldier desired. Seeing this, Zarek simply shook his head, too disinterested to even speak. With a powerful push against the ground, he launched himself into the air with a loud bang. In an instant, he reached the kunoichi, who was too slow to react. He struck the back of her neck with a swift chop. Her vision blurred, and she collapsed into unconsciousness. Zarek caught her mid-fall, carrying her in a princess carry as he looked ahead with narrowed eyes. Only one left, he thought to himself. This archer was truly exceptional. He had barely been able to sense her presence at all. If this continued, she might actually manage to escape. "Can't skimp out on my first job, can I?" Zarek thought, his mind flashing back to the moment the arrows had first flown. Using their trajectory, his pupils traced the path with precision. His thoughts raced, calculating the distance and angle. Then, a smirk curled on his lips as his eyes locked onto a specific direction. "Found you!" Zarek descended from the sky, landing precisely where he had pinpointed. There was no one in sight, but that didn't bother him. Starlight shimmered in his hand as he slammed it into the ground. Bang! The earth trembled violently beneath his strike, sending everyone nearby sprawling. Not far away, a woman became visible. She wore leather robes, with a bow slung over her shoulder and arrows strapped to her back. Zarek quickly closed the distance, shinobi still in his arms, and appeared right before the woman. "Don't try to escape so easily," he chuckled. The woman went pale, but didn't hesitate. Swiftly, she drew a dagger, its gleaming tip aimed straight at him. Her teeth clenched and brows furrowed. "You know it's useless, right? Will you come quietly, or should I make you?" For a moment, she hesitated, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Then, without a word, she lowered the knife and stepped forward with a blank expression. "That's a good girl," Zarek said with a chuckle. But just as she closed the distance, she suddenly lunged, raising her knife and stabbing him sharply in the neck. Zarek didn't move, not a flinch, not a twitch, as he coldly watched the knife drive toward his neck. But when the blade struck, its tip shattered, the edges dulling. He muttered coldly, "Are you done?" The woman straightened, swallowing hard as she met his boundless, icy blue eyes, eyes that seemed to hold an endless hunger. "Yeah," she whispered, her heart pounding fiercely. Every fiber of her being screamed that one wrong move would mean death. "Good." The sun blazed in the sky, casting its brilliant rays over a barren stretch of land. Its light caught on the youth's long golden hair, making it shimmer like molten gold. His piercing blue eyes scanned the soldiers encircling him. Cradled in his arms was the shinobi, while another woman in leather silently trailed behind, her head bowed. "Leave," Zarek commanded slowly as he stepped forward. The soldiers hesitated but took a step back, still maintaining their circle. Zarek said nothing, his silence heavier than any word. He calmly approached his hammer, lifted it, and strapped it onto his back. "It's time to go." The soldiers' firm encirclement made Zarek sigh. He didn't want to cause unnecessary deaths, nor was it his role to kill them all. He'd already dismantled the base by taking out the top dogs. If he left the rest to the soldiers, they'd be more than happy. "Lady, please forgive my excuse," Zarek said, glancing at the bowwoman. She tilted her head in confusion, but before she could react, Zarek grabbed her waist tightly with one hand while holding the shinobi in the other. With a powerful push against the ground, he leapt high, soaring over the soldiers and breaking through their encirclement in a single bound. Landing smoothly on the ground, Zarek nodded with a satisfied expression before turning and walking away. The soldiers stood in uneasy silence, the quiet stretching long enough to feel uncomfortable, until one finally broke it. "What do we do now?" In his words, the other soldiers' faces hardened with bitter uncertainty. None of them knew what to do. If they ran, they'd be branded traitors, doomed to humiliation even if spared execution. But staying meant certain death. "Have we called for reinforcements?" someone asked. "Yes, but time won't be enough." Before he could finish, thousands of arrows rained down from the sky, cutting through the soldiers like a river of blood. They stared in horror as a 1,000-strong Ragnarok army marched into view, an unstoppable, perfectly organized force. Zarek was traveling through the wasteland when suddenly his eyes flicked back, and he sneered. "So, they were following me." The bowwoman's eyes betrayed a flicker of confusion, but she said nothing, fear tightening her throat. Zarek glanced at her with curiosity. "Why did you follow me willingly? Aren't you scared of the fate that awaits surrendered soldiers?" She pouted slightly. "I'm not a soldier." "Then what are you?" "I'm a mercenary. According to the Seven Kingdoms Convention, as long as a mercenary surrenders, they still retain their human rights. And if they redeem themselves with enough money, they can be free again." "Oh, you were a mercenary. No wonder," Zarek said, then glanced at the shinobi in his arms. "And who is she?" "She's from one of the clans in the Reinhardt Empire. She'll be terrified when she wakes up. A prisoner loses all human rights and becomes a complete slave to their captor," Zarek muttered with a sigh. "Yeah, my name is Kiki, by the way," Kiki chuckled. "The shinobi's name is Nanami." "I see." Zarek nodded. "Now, can you please let me go?" Kiki asked, glancing down at her waist where Zarek's hand had been holding her. "Okay." Zarek released his grip, and Kiki quietly followed behind him, while Nanami, still unconscious, remained in his embrace. As they traveled in silence, Kiki glanced at Nanami, who was still cradled in Zarek's princess carry. Her cheeks slowly puffed out. For some reason, I feel left out." She sighed and finally spoke. "I'm tired. Can you carry me?" Zarek stopped in his tracks and tilted his head. "You don't look tired." "This bastard is so handsome, but so dense." Kiki cursed silently, but forced an honest expression. "Yeah, I really am tired. Can you carry me?" "Sure," Zarek shrugged, "but it'll cost you extra if you want to ride." Kiki fell silent for a moment before asking, "How much?" Zarek just smiled, reached out, and pulled her into his embrace. "Hold me tight. Let's go." "Okay." Kiki smiled brightly, feeling the strength of his arms and the hardness of his body. Her cheeks flushed a deep, fiery red. Before long, they arrived at the gates of Sun City, which swung open to welcome them. Zarek took in the scene silently. His body bore streaks of blood, and his very presence commanded respect. A booming announcement echoed through the city. Kane has fought bravely against 10 level 9 telekinetic users of the same level and killed 8 while capturing 2 alive. The declaration shook the crowd to its core. The people erupted in cheers, their voices rising in joy as they threw flowers along Zarek's path. "Kill those Reinhardt bastards. They burned and looted my village. Thank you, Master Kane, for fighting those blood-sucking fiends." Tears of joy streamed down some faces as roars erupted like a festival. Zarek watched the outpouring in silence, his steps steady as he moved forward, quietly thinking, how simple-minded these people are. He kept walking until he reached the front, where soldiers snapped to attention and saluted him. Before General Gerald stood, awaiting his return. "Welcome back, soldier. You've achieved what no one else could," the general said with respect. "It is my honor, General." Zarek returned the salute of his own. "Haha, we'll be colleagues soon. No need for formalities. Princess Melissa is already waiting for you. Go ahead." Zarek glanced at the two women. "What about them?" "They'll be escorted, and their fate is yours to decide, General Kane." General Gerald spoke with a hint of meaning while looking at the two women. "Understood." He nodded with a shrug. Zarek felt like he definitely misunderstood, however he was too lazy to explain, and then he walked forward, soon reaching a grand stage where the Princess of Carnage, Melissa, awaited. "Welcome," Melissa greeted with utmost seriousness. "You have earned great military merit, and this ceremony is to honor you." Around them, dozens of hummingbirds hovered, capturing every moment and angle, broadcasting live to the Empire's news channel. "Kane, stand before me." Melissa's shout shook the place, her voice stern and cold, filled with unshakable authority. Zarek nodded and stepped forward, coming to a stop directly in front of her. He met her green eyes in silence. "Kneel," she commanded. He obeyed, dropping to one knee. She extended her sword, resting it lightly on his right shoulder as she spoke in an even colder tone filled with authority. "I have considered your achievement in the military. We've been trying to breach that group of Level 9 bases for nearly a year, with countless Level 9 operatives dying in the attempt. Yet you alone have succeeded, risking your life to do so." She paused, letting the silence build a sense of anticipation in the air. Then she spoke, her voice deep and utterly serious. "That's why we have decided to grant you the position of general. Do you accept it?" Zarek raised his head. His boundless blue eyes locked onto hers, unwavering as he answered. "Yes, your blood will carve a path to the greatness of the Empire. From this moment forward, the Empire is all you will see, all you will serve. Do you accept this fate?" The sword moved, resting now on Zarek's left shoulder. "Yes," Zarek said firmly. Melissa nodded, then raised her sword before her. She traced a finger along its edge, drawing a small cut on her thumb. She let her blood drip onto the blade, then hoisted it high into the air before slashing toward the sky. Swish! The air split with a sharp hiss. Zarek looked up, his pupils flickering. The clouds above were cleaved apart, leaving a 100-meter-long sword mark etched across the heavens. Today, a new general is born, one who has walked through fire and flames for the Empire. Melissa roared. Citizens watching the Empire's broadcast erupted in cheers, filled with glee and excitement. In the Ragnarok Empire, every general was a prized asset. With each new one, it was a sign that the Empire's strength grew, and with it, the prosperity of its people. After the ceremony ended, Zarek was presented with the official military uniform of a general and a nameplate engraved with his new title, General Kane. With that, he had fully assumed the identity and responsibilities of one of the Ragnarok Empire's highest-ranking officers. He was then promptly guided to his luxurious quarters, where a maid left him with a simple parting message. "Princess Melissa will arrive shortly." Zarek gave a lazy nod, casually scanning the lavish room, until his gaze landed on two unexpected figures. One was a chained shinobi, the other a pink-haired woman standing nearby with a helpless expression. His brow furrowed. "What are you doing here?" he asked, frowning. "We were ordered to be here," Kiki replied with a bitter smile. "Rar." Nanami let out a fierce, cat-like growl, hatred blazing in her eyes as she glared at Zarek. "Oh," Zarek raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the intensity in her gaze. From the look of it, this shinobi clearly had anger issues, but, well, being captured by the enemy was a deeply humiliating experience. He supposed her rage made sense. With a sigh, he walked over to her and did something he'd already done with two other women. He reached out and patted her head. Instantly, Nanami trembled with fury. Her entire body shook with humiliation, and the grinding of her teeth echoed in the room. Zarek shrugged. Why are you so angry? Try to relax a little, okay? You bastard, she growled, struggling to speak through the cloth gag, muffling her words. Hey, don't be so angry. Zarek's expression shifted, turning ice cold. I'm a general of this empire. Do you dare defy me? His piercing gaze froze Nanami in place. Panic flared in her eyes, and she immediately fell silent, averting her gaze. Zarek let out a disappointed sigh and turned away. You two can leave, he said flatly. Tell them I don't need you. Your fate will be decided by them. Kiki's face turned pale. Please don't do that, she said, her voice trembling with desperation. Maybe I'll be fine. But for Nanami, with her temperament, her fate could be worse than death. Zarek's gaze darkened. And why, he asked coldly, should I care about either of you? Though Zarek was soft-hearted by nature, his actions were guided by principle. He wasn't the kind of man who'd take everyone under his wing out of blind charity, especially not without a reason. Kiki stammered, clearly struggling to find the right words. Just then, Nanami managed to force out a muffled plea. Remove gag from my mouth. Kiki glanced at Zarek for permission. Can I remove it? Yeah, Zarek replied with a casual shrug. Thank you. Kiki quickly moved to untie the cloth, freeing Nanami. Nanami gasped for breath, her chest rising and falling rapidly. But instead of taking time to recover, she fixed her gaze on Zarek and said clearly, I can work for you. Work for me. Zarek raised an eyebrow, mildly intrigued. Yeah, work for you. So will you help me? Nanami asked quickly, not giving him time to respond before continuing. As long as it doesn't involve killing anyone from the Reinhardt Empire, I'll follow your orders completely. Oh, not bad, Zarek murmured, almost to himself, as if weighing the offer. This can't possibly work so easily, right? Kiki thought to herself, slightly amused by Nanami's naivety. But to her shock, Zarek gave a simple nod. All right, you two will work for me. But remember this, my orders are absolute and must be followed without hesitation, he said, his tone firm and commanding. Yes, both women replied in unison, nodding quickly. Not only Kiki, but also Nanami was surprised. However, in her mind, she felt like this was a better option. Also, she had a hot head, but she still had some brains left. Then Zarek extended his hand and removed all the bindings from Nanami. And the two just remained in place while Zarek brewed some tea, which was at the table, patiently waiting for Melissa to come. There was an awkward silence in the room that was never broken by anyone until they heard footsteps outside. Melissa entered the room with a smile on her face. How are you guys doing? Good. Zarek nodded his head with a casual shrug. The two women beside Zarek glanced at Melissa, fear flickering in their eyes. No one dared forget the reputation of the strongest telekinetic master in the land. Known as the Princess of Carnage, she inspired terror in the hearts of all who crossed her path. Seeing her now, their heart rates inevitably skyrocketed. Zarek chuckled softly. Is my teleportation ready? Melissa nodded without hesitation. Yeah, it's ready. How could they instantly cross two empires and arrive at the Falcon Empire so quickly? The answer was simple: teleportation. Though a complicated process, human telekinesis wasn't as limited as it seemed. It could accomplish incredible feats, and this was one of them. Follow me. Zarek turned quietly to the two women, then glanced at Melissa, who gave a subtle nod. Without hesitation, they all quickly left the room. As the two women trailed behind Zarek and Melissa, uncertainty gnawed at their hearts. They couldn't decide what path they were on or what they should do next. Zarek had already noticed their hesitation, but he didn't care much. As long as they did their jobs properly, he'd be content. After all, both were powerful level 9 telekinetic users, and having them on his side would be invaluable. As for the idea of betrayal, they should already know the consequences. And if they still dared, well, Zarek would deal with it as the situation demanded. As thoughts swirled in his mind, They soon arrive at the deeper part of the palace and entered a dark room, where a faintly glowing circle shimmered in the center. Go, Melissa commanded. Zarek stepped into the glowing circle, the two women following close behind. Melissa finally broke the silence. I'm surprised you're bringing those two along. Aren't you afraid of betrayal? Never, Zarek replied confidently with a shrug. They're free to betray me if they want, if they can handle the consequences. Haha, that's my man, speaking so confidently. Melissa smirked. After you're teleported, remember to wait a while. The army will be coming after you. I don't care what your goal is, but remember this. You represent the face of the Empire. Never let it be tarnished. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. Yes, Zarek nodded, flashing a thumbs up. Little did she know, he wasn't going there to help humans, instead to support the dragons, while he grumbled silently in his heart. Woman, since when did I become your man? He couldn't let the balance between the humans and dragons fall that might ruin his chance to profit. The circle beneath them glowed with bright blue rays, and in the next instant, they vanished from the palace. Zarek felt momentarily disoriented, even a bit nauseous, before he quickly adapted to the shift. The next moment, he found himself under open skies, greeted by a crowd holding smiles and flowers. General Kane of the Ragnarok Empire has arrived. The announcement boomed loudly. A Falcon Empire general with a warm smile stepped forward to greet him. Zarek returned the smile and walked ahead confidently. The two women behind him, still recovering from their nausea, followed closely with shaky steps. Soon, soldiers from the Ragnarok Empire arrived as well. There were dozens of them, low-level telekinetic users, but enough to take down hundreds of ordinary troops with ease. General Kane, I must say, you are the second bravest person I have ever seen. Zarek glanced at the nameplate of the man and smiled warmly. It's my pleasure to meet you as well, General Alex. Ha! It's nothing compared to the famed general who defeated a group of level 9s with sheer strength alone, Alex said with a chuckle. Your reputation echoes throughout all 7 empires, while the Reinhardt Empire reels in shame and humiliation. It's nothing compared to a telekinetic master like yourself. I pale in comparison, Zarek replied humbly, even as he cursed inwardly. I hate these fake pleasantries. Haha. The atmosphere was pleasant as Zarek was led to his luxurious mansion, slightly smaller than the one Draken resided in, but still grand enough to accommodate an army and the servants who would attend them. After settling in, General Alex smiled and said, I hope you get a good rest. You have a hunt tomorrow, General Kane. Zarek nodded. You can rest assured about that, General Alex. You shouldn't have wasted your time on a mere level 9. No, it is my honor, Alex replied, shaking his head firmly. I am more honored that a capable and strong telekinetic master like you accompanied me, Zarek smiled. Your praise is undeserved. General Alex laughed and turned away. After Alex left the mansion, a servant quietly whispered into his ear, We've already planted the spies. Good, Alex whispered back, flashing a pleasant smile at the gathered citizens. I want to see just how strong this so-called General Kane really is. His telekinesis is stable and among the strongest I've seen, but I don't believe he could kill a dozen level 9 telekinetic users or capture 2 of them. Understood, Master. He's gone. Zarek's smile faded, and his eyes narrowed with a dangerous glint. This guy's up to something. He shrugged it off casually and stepped into his room. The 2 women followed him, but were promptly kicked out with a harsh command from Zarek. I need some personal space. The 2 stood there in stunned silence, their faces flustered, unsure of what to do next. Nanami and Kiki exchanged a glance and sighed softly. What's he going to do? Isn't he a man? Kiki pouted, a frown settling on her brows. She glanced at herself, noting her pronounced curves. She wouldn't call herself the most beautiful, but her looks were nothing to scoff at. Then she looked at Nanami, whose beauty was undoubtedly among the finest across these lands. But Zarek hadn't even glanced at either of them. It was as if they didn't exist. Wait, is he not a man? For a moment, Kiki even questioned his sexuality, but she quickly shook the thought away. In her mind, she couldn't imagine that. After all, she could still feel the heat when he carried her by her waist. That thing was a little too huge. Remembering that scene, Kiki's cheeks flushed briefly. Wait, does that mean he simply doesn't care? Nanami, on the other hand, didn't care at all. The man who had killed her comrade was now her master, her commander. How could she ever accept that? But considering how the captured soldiers were treated, it was still 1,000 times better than what she'd feared. So, with gritted teeth, she forced herself to accept it, though reluctance gnawed at her heart. I have to escape this place. She believed that if she managed to get away, her brother would be glad to see her again, and her clan would take her back. After all, she had done her best, right? Inside the room, Zarek sat quietly, lost in thought. Of course, as a man, he felt something when surrounded by such beauty, but he quickly reminded himself. Work first. Grind hard, champion. He could always find a wife and settle down later, but he didn't want a mediocre life. After all, he had risen from the depths of depression caused by his leg injury and gained an overwhelmingly powerful skill. He'd be a fool not to make full use of it and aim for the very top. With that resolve, he reached out to Draken, who was waiting in his mansion. Their thoughts were simple: how to minimize the loss of dragons while inflicting as much damage on the humans as possible without revealing their true identities. Draken, the dragon, and Zarek, who risked being branded a traitor, had to be extremely cautious. One wrong move could put Draken and Cynthia in danger or get Zarek exposed as a traitor. So, from dawn until nightfall, the two carefully laid out their strategies. Zarek had gathered ample intel from Melissa, and Draken had collected just as much. By combining their information, they formed a discreet plan that covered all angles, giving them a clearer and broader understanding of the situation. At night, both of them grew sleepy and soon fell into peaceful slumber. Draken cuddled with Cynthia, their arms wrapped around each other as they drifted off. Meanwhile, Zarek felt a little left out. His thoughts wandered to Nanami and Kiki, but he quickly slapped his own cheeks. That woman would stab me in the neck the moment she got the chance. What am I thinking, Zarek? He scolded himself and slowly closed his eyes. Just after he drifted off, the door creaked open slowly. Two figures entered quietly and glanced wearily at Zarek. Is he asleep? One whispered. They approached him, but Zarek suddenly snapped his eyes open. Who are you two? He growled. His gaze landed on Nanami and Kiki. Speak of the devil, he grumbled inwardly. We're only allowed to sleep in your chambers. Can you let us stay here? Fine. Sleep on the sofa, Zarek said, shooting a meaningful glance at Nanami. Don't try anything. You know what will happen, right? Yeah, Nanami shrugged indifferently and slumped onto the sofa. Despite it being just a sofa, her body sank comfortably into the soft velvet. Kiki joined her, settling down nearby. I have to put these girls to work soon and make them work to death. Evil thoughts stirred in Zarek's mind as he drifted to sleep. Tomorrow will be an important day and one that might decide. Draken slowly opened his eyes. Seeing the beautiful face of Cynthia, his heart couldn't help but feel warm, like the comfort of a home. He also noticed an arm behind him, hugging him tightly in an embrace. Seeing this, he frowned. Of course, he knew who this hand belonged to. But why was she here, embracing him so intimately? And right in front of his wife, no less. Draken felt like someone deserved a good beating, but when he thought about the poor state of the girl before she came under his care, he couldn't bring himself to do anything. He, of course, still had a modern mind and felt bad for the poor girl. Although he wanted to make her his guard and pushed her to the limits, her condition was vulnerable, and he didn't want to traumatize her again. Sigh, I'm still too soft-hearted, Draken sighed in the end. At that moment, Cynthia slowly opened her eyes and blinked. Her gaze dropped to where a slender hand was embracing him. Who is this woman? Her brows twitched. I can explain, Draken replied with a bitter smile. You bastard. A loud sound rang through the room, echoing off the walls. Bang! Hearing the loud sound, the servants outside wore strange expressions but continued with their work. After all, it was none of their business. After some loud bangs and crashing, the room finally returned to silence. Relax, This is a complete misunderstanding, Draken whispered in her ear, pulling her into a deep French kiss, their tongues dancing in symphony as if fighting for dominance. MHM. Cynthia simply closed her eyes and embraced him, enjoying the moment. The perpetrator who caused this scene stood frozen, a speechless expression on her face. Rowena looked at Draken with a slightly apologetic look. Even I don't know when, but I must have been sleepwalking. I somehow ended up in a master's bed without realizing it and hugged him tightly afterward. It's definitely strange, she thought to herself, her expression shifting through a mix of emotions. She felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in a long time, which made her heart happy, though she still felt regretful that Draken had gotten into trouble because of it. After some time, Draken and Cynthia finally separated, a thin trail of saliva connecting them for a moment. Their eyes, locked on each other, were filled with love and warmth. "Have you calmed down, dear?" Draken asked. "No," Cynthia replied. Then her gaze shifted to the side, toward Rowena. "Tell me what happened. Did he force you?" "No, milady," Rowena said, bowing her head. "I have a habit of sleepwalking while I'm asleep, which caused this to happen. I'm sorry." Cynthia drew a breath of hot air and sighed. Fine. We're getting late. Let's get dressed. Today is the Dragon Festival, after all." "Yes," Draken agreed without hesitation. Soon after, they came out of their house, greeted by the servants, and had lunch before heading into the streets to take in the festive atmosphere. Children played with bright smiles on their faces, hawkers called out their goods, and the entire street buzzed with vibrant energy, radiating a rare sense of peace. As they walked through the crowd, cheers and shouts could be heard from up ahead. Curious, Draken moved toward the commotion. There he saw numerous husbands bidding farewell to their wives and children, to their families. Going on a dragon hunt was a dangerous job. One misstep could mean death. The hunters needed to be extremely careful in their every action from this point forward, for one mistake could ensure they'd never see their families again. This parting felt like a final farewell. Countless tears fell to the ground. Some wives wept in sorrow. Children cried out for their fathers and mothers. Draken watched the scene with an expressionless face, his fist clenched tightly beneath his sleeves. Though his face showed nothing, his mind was far from still. After all, humans were still human. They felt sadness, just like dragons did when their loved ones fell. In this world, dragons and humans were like two sides of the same coin, bound together by fate, yet unable to coexist due to the countless grudges that stained their histories. What is the point of this endless killing, if all it brings is an unbroken cycle of grief and pain for both sides? At that moment, a thought was born in his heart, one that would shape the very future of the world. I will become the strongest among both humans and dragons, and bring peace to both. His bloodline surged, boiling within him. Veins bulged across every fiber of his being. A tearing pain exploded through his body. Draken was changing, transforming, as his bloodline erupted in full. Arcs of lightning danced and crackled around him, wild and untamed. You have fully awakened the power of your bloodline. You have gained the exclusive skill, Lord of Lightning. Lower tier skill detected, Ragen's Conduit, merging with a new skill. Congratulations! You have gained the exclusive skill, Supreme Lord of Lightning. Supreme Lord of Lightning. Lightning is your servant. Your will is its command. You may bend it at will. Every spark, every storm shall bow before you. You are the Supreme Lord of Lightning. Oh! He exhaled, his breath cold, his eyes flashing with a sharp glint. At that moment, the entire sky shifted, clouds churned, and thunder roared across the heavens. Lightning crackled with a deafening boom. Draken extended his hand and slowly closed his eyes. This power is so fascinating. At the same time, his level 3 dragon bloodline broke through, advancing directly to level 4. The people nearby panicked as they saw the skies darken without warning. But with a mere shift of thought, Draken willed the clouds away, and the sky cleared once more, revealing the bright sun. What's going on with today's weather? Is it a bad omen? No, This must mean even the human god is here to bless us. Hearing the murmurs and whispers around him, Draken simply shook his head. Cynthia glanced at him and asked without hesitation, "Did you do that?" "Yeah," Draken replied with a light chuckle. To be honest, Draken's strength had been a little lackluster before, simply because he hadn't had the time to grow yet. Although he had reached the fourth circle as a mage, that was clearly not enough. With every passing second, his aura continued to grow due to his aura farming spell. However, it was still a passive skill and didn't have much of an immediate effect. His aura's power had increased by barely over 20%. In fact, Erike had benefited the most from it. His aura had already increased by 50%, mostly due to the Earth, where he had become a hot topic that shook the entire world. But even then, his strength wasn't apparent enough when he used his aura. Now that Draken had not only leveled up his dragon bloodline, but also gained this supreme skill, a surge of confidence welled up within him. This confidence stemmed from his newfound strength. He felt as if he could even compete with a telekinetic master using this skill alone. Of course, that was only a theory, and he would need to test it himself. As they were walking, Pierce approached them, his round body panting from exertion. "Wait, I forgot to give you the pass, so you can enter the dragon hunting festival." Draken silently took the pass. Then both he and Cynthia turned around and left, leaving Pierce behind. After they left, Draken flashed a mysterious smile and murmured in his heart, "You are dead." Then he walked away with Cynthia. Pierce was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he gritted his teeth. But in the end, only a helpless sigh escaped him. "I'm just an eternal slave now. What can I do?" His eyes flashed with a mysterious glint before he turned and walked back to the mansion that had been captured for him. Once inside, the helpless, bitter expression vanished, replaced by a complex mix of emotions. He stepped into his office and fell silent, pressing his fingers together in complete stillness. Though his face was hidden behind his hands, the corner of his lips couldn't help but curve in triumph. At first, a quiet giggle slipped out, then a laugh erupted and echoed throughout the room. "I no longer have a life and death pill, huh? That bastard really thought I was so simple. But I am anything but simple." His grin widened uncontrollably. "Not only did I find the life and death pill through my grandpa's research, but I also found a cure for it. Though, the cure only works if it's taken before the body fully digests the pill." He clenched his fists, his eyes narrowing sharply. Pierce felt like he was on top of the world. He had even outsmarted the dragons. Now that they've left, I can contact everyone and launch a full-scale assault on them. Then I'll rip that bastard apart and... His mind wandered to the image of Cynthia, and a lecherous smile twisted his face. Drool even leaked from the corner of his mouth. "I'll have my way with her before she dies." Just then, the door creaked open. Pierce's expression changed instantly, a hint of panic flashing in his eyes. "Who's there?" he shouted. Gradually, a figure came into view, a woman with fluffy dogtails and 2 canine-like ears. She was a beauty in every sense. Pierce's face turned pale. A sense of dread welled up in his heart. Rowena, why are you here?" Rowena twirled a dagger between her fingers, her voice laced with bloodlust. "Why do you think I'm here?" What are you going to do?" Pierce hiccuped, eyes wide in terror. His body trembled as he stammered, "I." His hand began to move toward a hidden button beneath the table. But Rowena was faster. She lunged forward and slit his throat without hesitation. But in that brief moment, Pierce had already managed to press the button, and an alarm blared throughout the mansion. Unfortunately, it was too late for him. Blood gushed violently from his neck, spurting like a fountain and splattering across the room. He collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud, his eyes still wide open in horror. Hurried footsteps echoed from outside, but Rowena only shrugged casually. With her current skill level, there was no way she could fight off the guards, so she leapt through the window and dashed away on all fours. Draken and Cynthia entered a narrow alleyway and were immediately confronted by a group of thugs, but Draken took care of them with ease. After a short while, Rowena appeared. "Master, I've killed him, she reported. Good. Draken nodded, a satisfied expression on his face. He gently patted her head, causing Rowena to blush. She knew her master was a dragon, and as long as they weren't human, she would gladly serve anyone who stood against humanity. Let's go now, Cynthia said, tugging at his sleeve. Wait a minute. We still have someone else here. Huh? Cynthia blinked in confusion, just as a hummingbird fluttered into view. Draken tied the telekinetic serum to the bird and gave it a light pat on the back. Go. The hummingbird swiftly turned and flew away. What was that? Cynthia asked. Something mysterious, Draken chuckled. Also, didn't you say we already have a spy planted among the participants of the dragon hunting festival? Yeah, Cynthia nodded. Then let's join them. The hummingbird traveled swiftly and landed in a quiet corner of an alleyway. After a short while, a man completely cloaked in a robe appeared. Man, I finally lost them, he muttered, grumbling to himself. Zarek picked up the hummingbird, unwrapped the small package it carried, and stared at the vial of telekinetic serum with narrowed eyes. This could be his chance, a way to level up his telekinesis skill and finally be free from the pain that came with it. Without hesitation, he opened the vial and drank the serum, gulping it down in uneven swallows. Almost immediately, a strange energy surged through his body, overwhelming him. And from that energy came pain, an agony so deep, it felt like it tore at his very soul. If a normal person took it, they would instantly die. This thought instantly appeared in Zarek's mind as he endured the pain. The moment the telekinetic serum entered his body, it was instantly digested with the help of his skill Devour. The Pierce guy was not lying when he said this was just a prototype and wasn't prepared for normal use yet. Zarek felt a burning pain, almost like 1,000 ants were gnawing at his very soul. This was the feeling he got as he writhed in agony. There was definitely a strange energy inside his body that was trying to cause something strange and unknown. However, because he was too focused and couldn't concentrate properly in his condition, Zarek couldn't determine what exactly was going on. But at the same time, he was adapting to the strange power that came from the telekinetic serum. For a moment, he was in nothing but pain, but after some time, a strange sensation erupted within him. A sensation that felt very foreign and unfamiliar. His cheeks puffed up and a moan escaped his mouth. What the hell? Zarek hurriedly gathered his state. He had almost gone into a state of pure euphoria. What was I doing? His heart skipped a beat. He looked around and settled, leaning on a greasy wall. Even though the nausea from the garbage around him was disorienting, he had to endure it for now, so that whatever was happening to his body while adapting to the telekinetic serum could proceed peacefully. Luckily, after some time, his nose had already adapted to the smell around him, and Zarek could finally breathe calmly again. The change had finally settled down, and he was resting on the spot with a relieved breath. A blue prompt appeared in front of him, making his eyes light up in excitement. Your soul has adapted to the telekinetic energy. Full potential of telekinesis unlocked. When my body adapted to telekinesis, I gained telekinetic resistance. When my mind adapted, I could finally use it on my own. Now that my soul has adapted, its full potential is unlocked. Zarek sighed and tightened his fist. He looked at his skill, which indeed no longer had the level lock limit. He could now freely upgrade it with destiny points if he wished. Just then, his expression suddenly shifted, and his eyes widened. You have unlocked the full potential of your telekinesis, gaining the purest form of the human bloodline. Your telekinesis has reached completion, and a unique attribute has been awakened. You may now specialize your telekinesis with a path of power. Pyrokinetic channeler, body reinforcer, gravity, manipulator, mind breaker. Staring at the variety of unique attributes before him, Zarek felt his breath quicken almost instantly. This is going to be amazing, he murmured, clenching his fist. Zarek hadn't expected that not only would he be able to unlock the skill and upgrade it freely with destiny points, he'd also gain something like this. Which one should I choose, though? Thinking that, he focused on the name using his inspect skill This was a skill that he had gotten when Gang Rayon was inspecting those pills in the martial world. Pyrokinetic channeler, merge flame and telekinesis to manipulate fire with your mind. Launch burning objects, ignite enemies, and control heat like a living inferno. Body reinforcer, channel telekinetic energy through your own body. Boost strength, speed, and reflexes beyond natural limits. Gravity manipulator, control the weight and movement of objects and people. Increase or decrease gravity, crush enemies, or fly. Mindbreaker, use telekinesis to crush minds and disrupt thoughts of the opponent. This is not bad, Zarek mumbled in his heart with thoughtfulness. Every one of this special evolution of telekinesis was one of the best he had seen. However, he could only choose one, which made him feel a little regretful in his heart because of it. Choosing one of the attributes, he had to be extremely careful about it. So he contacted his main body and all the other clones as well. Discussion ran continuously. After a long time, they were finally able to reach a logical conclusion. In the end, Zarek chose Gravity Manipulator. This was the only skill he felt was worth having and one of the best suited to his inherent adapt skill. Zarek could already conjure fire, ice, lightning, and many more using his mana core already. This was because he hadn't inscribed a circle in his mana core yet. However, this has its downside as well, and that was he had limited mana and his magic power, no matter which magic he uses, would have the same weak strength of a mage acolyte. It would take too long to explain. However, in simple words, each circle inscribed made the mana denser and the mana core bigger. But since he didn't have any circle to strengthen each other, without a spell inscribed in his mana core, he was stuck with a limited amount of mana, which, in turn, makes it so that he was versatile, but the power was significantly weaker. And with this gravity manipulator, not only could he use it on his opponent, but also on himself as well to strengthen his body by adapting to the gravity. All things considered, Zarek had carefully picked this skill out. The moment he picked up the attribute, there was not much physical change in his body. However, he could sense his bloodline had changed subtly, and, with it, the mysterious energy of his telekinesis also changed. Curious, Zarek extended his hand and pointed at the garbage can in front of him. Immediately, cracking noises rang out, and the garbage can was gradually crushed to the ground. However, not only this garbage can, but also all the other things in the vicinity were affected as well. Zarek himself felt a little lethargy, as if the ground itself was trying to tie him down. This is an AoE thing, huh? He murmured in his heart. Although this wasn't nearly enough for him to even sweat, he had barely used 20% of his full telekinetic power. The garbage around him started to shatter, plastering to the ground one by one. Zarek stood up, and his nose twitched. "I'll need to bathe again," he sighed, "but it's already too late." Cursing at himself, he walked out of the alleyway. Immediately, people started giving him weird stares while staying far away and blocking their noses. Zarek saw this and couldn't help but grumble in his heart. This was purely because of the smell. He still had some confidence in his handsomeness thanks to his title, which allowed him to maintain a perfect body no matter how he trained. Anyway, he walked into a tailor's shop and spoke lightly. "Give me some new clothes." "No," a receptionist replied, giving him a disdainful look. "Go beg on the streets, beggar. You're disrupting our business." Zarek felt a twitch in his brow. Am I getting the same treatment as those miserable protagonists? The cliché story where the protagonist gets humiliated, only to reveal he's actually a big shot and slaps back at their face. Well, it was certainly an interesting story from the reader's perspective, the kind that makes him cheer hard, but for Zarek, it just felt a little uncomfortable. He was a general of the Ragnarok Empire. After all, he represented the face of the Empire. If he caused a commotion like a child, he'd only lower himself. So Zarek sighed, turned around, and walked away. Humph, at least this beggar knows his place. The receptionist snickered in disdain. Just then, a man entered the shop and glanced at Zarek for only a split second, his pupils instantly distorted. "Go, General," he stuttered, scared shitless. Zarek tilted his head. "I've seen a portrait of yours. Why have you come to our humble shop?" His voice froze mid-sentence. He could now smell the stench, and, seeing Zarek's tattered clothes, his face immediately turned pale. "I'll get clothes right away, sir. For now, you just need to take a bath." Zarek nodded, and they walked back inside. The receptionist saw her boss following behind Zarek with utter respect. A single word slipped out of her mouth almost instinctively. Shit. It was at this moment that she knew she was fucked. Zarek glanced at the receptionist with a casual expression. The owner turned to her and frowned. "What are you doing? Prepare a bath for this extreme VIP and get the most branded clothes we have. Now." "Oh, okay," she replied, swallowing hard. After that, Zarek promptly took a bath in one of the most luxurious bathrooms and was greeted by several maids, each helping him dress, their faces blushing as they worked. At that moment, the owner of the shop approached him with an apologetic smile, the receptionist following closely behind. It's fine," Zarek said with a casual shrug. "I don't care about petty things. However, remember this, never underestimate anyone. They might be poor today, but the future is always uncertain. The least you can do is show them a little respect." "Yes." The woman nodded, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "Thank you so much." Disrespecting a general? That was practically treason. Even if he was a general from another nation, for a mere commoner like her, it was as good as a death sentence. After that, Zarek left and returned to his mansion, where his soldiers were already lined up, prepared to set off. "Let's go," Zarek nodded. The soldiers looked a little tentative, hesitation on their faces, until one of them finally asked, General Kane, where did you go? We didn't even notice you. Is it your place to question where I go?" Zarek's expression turned instantly stone cold. No. The soldier immediately stiffened, a guilty expression forming on his face. "It is our utmost duty to slay the dragons. Time is of the essence, so let's move," Zarek said, glancing from the corner of his eye at an almost indiscernible shadow, a sneer curling in his heart. Then they quickly set off down the road, the people stepping aside in silent respect. Soon, they reached the main headquarters of the Dragon Slayers. This was the true headquarters, the central hub of an organization whose branches were spread across the entire continent. It was somewhat similar to the Awakener Association. The place was enormous, featuring a massive, dome-shaped structure rather than a typical mansion. Surrounding it were gardens that stretched nearly a kilometer in all directions. At this moment, the entire area was bustling with activity. Groups of people moved about. Individuals of varying skin tones, cultures, and accents filled the space. The whole place was alive with noise and motion. Zarek stood silently, observing the crowd. His sharp eyes scanned every figure, mentally matching their faces with the information he had memorized. Even though both of them had grown significantly stronger, their operation needed to remain stealthy and swift. Just then, Zarek spotted Draken and Cynthia standing off in a corner, quietly whispering to each other. Draken gave a subtle nod, and Zarek's eyes flashed in response. At that moment, General Alex approached with a smile on his face. "Come, General Kane. We'll introduce you to the others." Zarek nodded. As they walked, General Alex spoke in a slightly mysterious tone. "I must commend your bravery, General Kane. A true warrior. You're not even wearing armor. Are you planning a hunt like this?" "Yeah," Zarek replied with a casual shrug. "How else would I hunt?" "Haha, I see." Alex nodded. "Though, I heard some citizens talking you were seen on the streets in a miserable condition earlier. Did some thugs beat you or something?" His tone was laced with deep apology and concern. "If that's the case, please tell me, General Kane. I'll do everything I can to bring them to justice." Zarek didn't respond. His face remained expressionless, his emotions unreal. This guy is definitely interesting, Zarek thought calmly in his heart. A tongue as venomous as a snake, that fake smile, and every tomfoolery possible. I hate everything about it. As a person from Earth, where individual strength meant nothing and words were greater than even weapons, he had, of course, experienced the arts of the tongue. A manipulative way of talking that, to spectators, might make you look like the good guy, But in actuality, it was all just fake. A Reich on Earth had always hated these things as if they were the bane of his existence, and this guy in front of Zarek was no different. Zarek felt like puking from Alex's behavior. However, he managed to control himself and not beat the shit out of him. With a calm and cold expression on his face, Zarek followed Alex and finally arrived at a group of bulky men in armor. They looked more like knights, each with nameplates. General Kale, General Richard, General Maximus. These three generals came from three different empires. Luckily, for Zarek, none of them were from the Reinhard Empire. Are you the famed new general for the Ragnarok Empire, General Kane? General Kale asked, raising his brows. My reputation overestimates my capability, General Kale. Your silver whip has caused everyone to bleed, Zarek said with a smile on his face. Ha! You're overpraising me, Kale laughed it off. Just like that, they exchanged some pleasantries, and the whole fiasco was pretty much over. They still talked about politics and such, but Zarek wasn't really interested in any of it. Even though he knew he would need it someday, he wasn't particularly inclined toward it. He might be able to become stronger through the power of the adapt alone and become the strongest, so there was no need for him to dip his hand into politics. However, if he needed to, then he would do so without hesitation. Time passed in the blink of an eye. A chilly gust of wind blew over everyone. The cold wind brushed against Zarek's face, and his long golden hair fluttered in the air. His crystal blue pupils seemed to contain an endless charm, something that couldn't be measured. The generals were still talking with smiles on their faces. However, there was a hidden meaning behind their words, almost like hyenas in a pack, each ready to tear the other apart at a moment's notice. Zarek's ears had already grown immune to the generals' bickering. Their voices were like fading echoes to him. The surroundings were already packed to the brim with people. Around them, there were certain unspeakable gaps, but all other areas were crowded to the point it looked like a Japanese train station after office hours. His blue pupils subtly observed everyone and finally landed on a girl with white hair. Who is she? His gaze narrowed slightly. He had already memorized the names and appearances of all the strong ones, but this girl was someone he couldn't place. She felt strange to him, as if she didn't match any description. She's a level 9. Just as he was contemplating, a loud drum echoed through the sky, followed by a powerful announcement. The Emperor has arrived. In an instant, silence fell, a pin-drop silence replacing the earlier chaos. A storm brewed in the sky, and a man's figure slowly enlarged in Zarek's vision. Then the man gradually revealed himself, a figure wearing a golden crown and armor adorned with gold and metal. He floated in the air, as if the sky itself were his home ground. His entire regal demeanor commanded respect, an unspeakable authority that no one present could defy. Zarek looked the man straight in the eyes. It was a rugged, familiar face, not from his own memories, but from Draken's, who stood at the corner watching the scene with Cynthia. This man, the king of the Falcon Empire, had also been one of the participants in the attack on Draken's wedding. A telekinetic paragon. Just his presence alone demanded reverence. No one in the vicinity even dared to twitch a muscle in front of him. Fear? They felt fear, but it was more of an instinctive response. If someone wanted to shit right now, their body might freeze in place and refuse to even defecate. This was the power of a paragon, the middle-aged man with a rugged face, the power of the Falcon Empire's emperor. Behind him floated numerous old men. Their presence wasn't weak by any means, but compared to the telekinetic paragon, they were like mere dew on the grass, lackluster and insignificant in the shadow of the emperor. Cough, cough, the middle-aged man coughed, immediately causing everyone to straighten their backs. I'm the emperor of the Falcon Empire. He paused, letting a heavy tension settle in the air. As you all know, we were defeated by those worms when he attacked during their dear princess's wedding. The emperor spoke, his words casting a gloomy shadow over the surroundings. The atmosphere grew heavy, oppressively depressive. But worry not. This hunting festival will surely be our victory, as we will kill all the rogues in our lands. The tension instantly lifted replaced by a wave of anticipation and suppressed excitement. This will be a massacre, a bloody massacre, where we kill all dragons outside the Dragon Kingdom. "Who is with me?" he shouted. The mere shout shook the surroundings, the very air trembling under the force of his voice. "These mere vermin shall face our divine wrath." "So who is with me?" "Us." Everyone roared in bloodthirsty unison. The intent to kill the dragons reached an all-time peak. "Show them the strength of our human god, the one true supreme God," he cried, spreading his arms to the sky and laughing. "To our true supreme human God." They echoed as one, voices united in fervor. Zarek looked at this and shook his head. "I wonder how many of you will even survive, let alone hunt a dragon like that." The Dragon Hunting Festival was about to begin with the speech of the Falcon Emperor. Now, the only one left to speak was the head of the Dragon Slayers, the one who established the entire guild and its branches throughout the land. The Dragon Hunting Festival was pretty simple in itself. Its goal was to hunt the rogue dragons scattered across the lands. You see, not every dragon stayed in the Dragon Kingdom. Many went out to train and grow stronger, while others were on specific missions. And the people here were targeting those dragons as a whole. Luckily, the telekinetic Grandmaster and telekinetic Paragon wouldn't attack the dragons, so the only threat they faced came from telekinetic masters and those below. This was purely because if a telekinetic Grandmaster or Paragon attacked, then the dragons would retaliate with their own. You think the dragons don't know about this event? With the cult already deep within human territory, of course they knew about it. However, this dragon-slaying festival always happened randomly, too late to recall the dragons outside. But if the humans were to use Grandmasters or Paragons, then of course the dragons would retaliate as well. So, it was always a tactical decision to only use telekinetic masters or those below. This should be fine. Draken's pupils flickered. His eyes were focused on the woman with white hair and crimson eyes. She was certainly attractive, but his gaze wasn't drawn by her beauty. It was because of her mysteriousness. Draken was pretty sure she wasn't one of the participants, so she must have sneaked into this place when no one was looking. It seemed like trouble was already brewing. Ow! He let out a small cry of pain as he looked down to see a woman's foot stepping on his leg. "Are you already looking at another woman?" "No, no." Draken vehemently shook his head and whispered in her ear, "Listen to me." After hearing everything Draken said, Cynthia was a little stunned and looked at him apologetically. "Sorry. It's fine." Just as they were talking, a woman gradually came into view, floating in the sky, arriving side by side with the Falcon Emperor. Her golden hair fluttered in the sky, and she wore a blindfold. Her mere presence was comparable to that of the Falcon Emperor. This woman, Draken's thoughts grew serious. Although she hadn't shown up during the attack on his wedding, it was undeniable this woman was a telekinetic Paragon. "You shouldn't have waited for me to arrive before starting the dragon hunt," she said with a smile, her voice extremely pleasant, almost soothing to the soul. "Go now, brave warriors, and kill every single one of those dragons for me. Those who slay the most will be rewarded with money, weapons, and anything you desire." Yes, the fighting spirit of everyone surged, rising by several levels, until finally the gates opened with her words. Like bloodthirsty wolves finally let out of their cage. It truly was a stampede. The very ground trembled as everyone charged out. The blindfolded woman watched with a gentle smile on her face. At this moment, the Emperor of the Falcon Empire smiled and spoke. "I didn't expect you to come out of seclusion, Mirabella, Witch of Disaster." Mirabella turned toward the Emperor and smiled gracefully. "The humans lost the previous battle, and the power of our gods has weakened. How could I not come?" "Oh," the Emperor raised his brow. "I assumed your mood would be low, but you seem rather happy. That's because I may have found someone who might be the chosen one." "The chosen one?" Even the Emperor's voice cracked. His eyes widened, and his pupils nearly dilated. "Someone with the purest human bloodline." Mirabella simply nodded. "Who is it?" the Emperor asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. "That is a secret, Emperor," Mirabella replied calmly. We will be testing him. And if he truly is the chosen one, then by the will of our God, he shall wield Excalibur. As you say, the emperor gave a nod and fell silent. Yet the fist hidden within his sleeve couldn't help but tighten. The people had already scattered across the land, holding maps and compasses, each trying to track down rogue dragons. Draken moved out with Cynthia, and after some time, Rowena joined them as well. Who will be our first target? Cynthia asked. He pulled out a bundle of photos from his pocket and handed them to her. On the first page was the image of a lean man wearing glasses. Although he might look weak, he's actually quite strong and highly proficient in the arts of poison and needles. Is he one of those mutated telekinetic users you were talking about? Cynthia's eyes widened. No, Draken chuckled. Don't worry. He's only dangerous if you get hit by the poison. He's so proficient with it that even a level 6 dragon might fall unconscious if struck. This sounds way too dangerous, Cynthia hesitated. Although she supported his plan, she couldn't help but worry. They were still relatively weak, and if they were discovered by a level 9 or surrounded by multiple enemies, not to mention telekinetic masters, it could spell their end. Don't worry, Draken said with a grin. Trust your man. Soon, they crept up on a figure lurking in the wild, hidden beneath the shadows of a tree. It was the exact person they were looking for. The two exchanged a glance and nodded before Draken swiftly and silently closed in on the target, preparing to eliminate him with a single punch. But just then, a sharp arrow tore through the sky, trailing a blaze behind it. Shit! Draken cursed in his heart as he was forced to retreat, quickly pulling back to safety. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the surroundings. Haha, there really are cult members this stupid? A mocking voice rang out. Hundreds of figures stood among the branches of the trees, silently watching Draken. Seeing them, Draken fell silent for a moment, his gaze sharpening, eyes narrowing ever so slightly. You're dead, you cult bastards. You betrayed humanity. Have you no shame, bowing to lesser creatures? Dragons are nothing more than oversized worms. You're a disgrace. A failure. The shouts rang out in unison, hundreds of voices merging into a single roar. The sound echoed through the forest, rattling the trees and making the ground tremble faintly. Draken simply shrugged, calm and unbothered. He extended a hand forward. I'll test my new skill on you, he muttered silently. Arcs of lightning crackled around his body as his long crimson hair turned into sharp, spiky strands of glowing white. The sky above darkened. Thunder rumbled, and lightning fell. What is he? The telekinetic users perched on the tree branches grew uneasy as the sky shifted. A strange pressure weighed down on them, like the heavens themselves were bending to the will of the man below. There are only two, and we are countless. Focus and finish them all, one of them shouted with all his might. Yes. Their voices rose in unison. Courage surged through the group as unity rekindled their hope. Then came the assault. Swords were flung like spears, arrows loosed in waves, and daggers hurled in deadly volleys, and other countless weapons rained down. With precise control, they manipulated each weapon midair using telekinesis, weaving them like guided missiles, all aimed at the man with spiky white hair. Draken stood still, calm, and unflinching beneath the storm of attacks. Had this attack landed, it would have been fatal, maybe not for a telekinetic master, but any level 9 would have been obliterated on the spot. Even his former self would have barely survived, likely left with devastating injuries. But now, Draken didn't move. Just as the storm of weapons was about to strike, lightning roared from the heavens. Dragons forged of pure electricity descended in a flash, incinerating every weapon midair. Blades, arrows, daggers, everything was vaporized in an instant, reduced to nothing by the searing wrath of thunder. Draken muttered, thoughtfully touching his chin. Should I capture them or wipe them out? The lightning dragons didn't disappear after their strike. Instead, they soared upward, then coiled around him, circling like sentient beasts, forming a crackling army of lightning dragons behind him. Draken stood motionless, his spiky white hair crackling with energy as the lightning dragons circled around him like guardian beasts. The telekinetic users froze, their faces pale in terror. What is this? He can control lightning? A monster. He's a monster. Wait, there was intel about a dragon with powers like this. The groom of the dragon princess. Draken. He has the same ability. A moment of silence passed as they exchanged fearful glances. Then, without another word, they scattered, vanishing into the forest with desperate haste. Draken watched them flee, a sneer curling on his lips. Did you really think you could escape so easily after attacking me? His eyes locked onto the fastest runner, a lean man with glasses, the one who had sneakily hurled a nearly invisible, poison-coated needle at him. Draken raised his hand and pointed 2 fingers at the man like a gun. In an instant, one of the lightning dragons shot across the ground like a predator unleashed, obliterating the lean man into nothing but a cloud of scorched ash. Without pause, Draken began pointing at others. Each time his fingers locked onto a target, a lightning dragon roared to life, weaving through trees and terrain with terrifying speed. One by one, the attackers were reduced to ash, their screams lost in the crackle of divine fury. Within moments, a dozen lay dead. Draken lowered his hand slightly, an expression of boredom creeping across his face. Still so many left, he mused. He raised his palm, ready to unleash a full storm and end it all in one devastating wave. But just then, a sharp voice rang out from the sky. Stop! A woman descended from the heavens, flying upon a gleaming sword. Her presence itself commanded respect. Draken glanced up at the woman, tilting his head slightly, an almost innocent look on his face. Why should I stop? He asked, his tone calm, almost playful. He shrugged. Stop me if you can. If not, get lost. At that moment, the lightning dragons behind him surged forward, blitzing across the battlefield at the speed of lightning. Every fleeing figure was struck down in an instant, reduced to ash before they could scream. No, the woman roared, her voice cracking with fury and horror, her eyes burning blood red. But how could she hope to match lightning? Before she even touched the ground, it was over. Every last one of them. Gone. The woman crashed to her knees, eyes wide and bloodshot as she stared at the scorched earth. Smoke curled from burning trees, ashes swirled in the air like snowfall, and the silence was deafening. Utter devastation. Nothing remained but destruction. Her body trembled, disbelief etched across her face. Her pupils flickered, as though her mind refused to accept what she was seeing. How could this happen? She grit her teeth. She turned her head to look at Draken. I'm going to kill you, bastard. Oh, Draken raised his brows. He could sense her level. She was a telekinetic master, but he felt no fear in his heart. On the contrary, this woman was the perfect test subject for his power. With that thought, he unleashed his full strength. Arcs of lightning crackled wildly around him as he slowly rose into the air. The lightning dragons circling the sky returned to him, shrinking as they spiraled into his body. Boom! Draken's eyes flared with a blinding burst of blue lightning. Wherever his gaze landed, everything was reduced to ash in an instant, consumed by the sheer power radiating from his eyes. For a moment, his entire body shone with a brilliant blue light. The clouds in the sky churned violently, sending powerful bursts of lightning crashing down onto him, fueling his power. With every strike, his strength grew bit by bit. Though temporary, the energy also steadily reinforced his body. I'm close to hitting rank 5, Draken thought, eyes fixed on the woman before him. She swallowed hard, fear flickering in her gaze. But as a telekinetic master witnessing the devastation unfolding and knowing who she faced, there was no way she could back down. Where would her pride be if she did? You're just a rank 3 dragon. Even if you've reached a higher rank, it shouldn't be more than rank 4. How dare you stand before a telekinetic master? She mustered her courage. Draken extended his hand forward, beckoning with his fingers. Try me, then. Draken, Cynthia, standing to the side, watched the scene with stunned eyes. How strong was a telekinetic master? In theory, they were as powerful as a rank 7 dragon. Though even dozens of telekinetic masters could barely match one. Now Draken's mere presence was enough to make... How powerful has he become? Cynthia thought, glancing at her own state. After the tournament, she had barely grown stronger. She had gained some knowledge of spells, but that was about it. She was still a rank 3 dragon. In simple terms, she was weak. I don't want to be weak, Cynthia thought to herself as she looked at Draken's powerful form. Will I become a burden to him in the future? The thought struck her like thunder, making her feel nauseous, her legs trembling as a wave of helplessness washed over her. For a moment, she stood expressionless, almost completely frozen in place. Then she finally looked up with determined eyes and tightened her fist. I must get stronger. The thought settled firmly in her mind. To be of help to Draken, she had to grow stronger, far stronger than her previously weak self. This would become her resolve, her unshakable determination to rise. What she didn't know was that this tiny spark in her heart would soon blaze into an unquenchable flames, one that would make her the strongest woman in the world. What's wrong? Face me if you can, Draken taunted with a mocking tone. The woman gritted her teeth, hatred shimmering in her eyes as she glared at him. You think you can do anything you want? Yeah, of course, Draken shrugged with nonchalance. Face me like someone who deserves the title of telekinetic master. You, she growled, teeth grinding together as she stomped the ground, ready to unleash hell upon him. However, her instinct screamed, don't advance, don't bite the bait. Am I feeling fear? Her trembling body suddenly stilled. The fear in her expression faded, replaced by a cold, unreadable mask. For a moment, I forgot who I am, she mumbled. Then, without urgency, she drew a simple weapon, a small knife with a razor-sharp edge. With a casual swipe, she dragged the blade across her palm. Blood dripped steadily, falling to the ground. Do you know about mutant telekinetic users, brat? She asked in a deep, cold whisper. I know, Draken replied. Are you one? What do you think? She chuckled. As the blood seeped into the ground, it began to spread. Though only a few drops had fallen, the entire ground started to become drenched, almost as if the blood were multiplying, soaking the whole area in crimson. Draken hovered in the sky, eyes narrowed. A faint premonition stirred in his heart as he gazed at the blood-soaked earth. It felt as though the ground itself had been wounded. Then, to his absolute astonishment, the woman opened her eyes, revealing 2 sharp fangs. At that moment, the blood-soaked ground glowed with a bright red light, illuminating the entire area in a flash of red. Even Draken had to squint, his glowing eyes, with limitless electric power, struggling against the intense radiance. Ordinary telekinetic masters wielded powers capable of manipulating 200 to 300 kilograms with virtually unlimited range. This level of power alone was enough to crush anyone who stood in their way. And even if someone managed to resist it somehow, the force carried an everlasting property. Most telekinetic users exhausted their power after a period of use and required time to recuperate, but a master's power possessed an eternal quality. It didn't fade, just like when Zarek faced Melissa's telekinesis during their first encounter. Even though he had perfectly resisted it and halted its momentum, there remained a lingering pressure, an energy that never disappeared. Draken felt a flicker of nervousness in his heart, but even stronger than that was a surge of pure excitement. His lips curled upward, an almost feral grin forming. He raised his palm, and a surge of hyperelectric beams descended upon the crimson light. Bang! It was like an apocalyptic scene. The deafening explosion echoed through the surroundings. The ground collapsed under the force, forming a massive crater, and the blood-red light finally subsided. As the dust cleared, the aftermath was revealed, a shattered army of red beings. Their remains splattered across the earth, and at the center stood the woman, her brows twitching, her clothes in tatters. That's it. Even Draken felt his brows twitch in disbelief. "Who are you?" the woman asked calmly as she stood up. "What kind of power is this? You defeated my undying blood army in a matter of seconds." "Blood army?" Draken raised his palm toward her, electric energy already crackling and gathering, ready to obliterate her on the spot. "Are you like a blood necromancer or something?" Without hesitation, he released a surge of lightning, stronger than before. "Oomph." The woman scoffed as she jerked her hand, blood seeping in her palm and transforming into a sleek crimson scythe. With an elegant twist of her body, she dodged the lightning blast mid-air, soaring upward using her sword. In an instant, she launched herself at him, scythe gleaming as she slashed toward him without mercy. Not exactly a necromancer, more like someone who can manipulate blood," Draken muttered calmly, voicing his thoughts as he felt a pressure squeezing his entire body. Of course, for a dragon, this was nothing. He simply flexed his muscles, and the invisible pressure shattered instantly. The woman visibly flinched but didn't relent. She pointed at the ground, and cracks immediately formed, followed by a chunk of land ripping free and hurtling toward him. Draken shrugged with casual indifference. He raised his palms, and a concentrated blast of lightning obliterated the incoming debris. But in the next instant, as the dust scattered, she was already there. The woman had closed the distance, her blood scythe poised just inches from his neck. "Weak," he said in a flat tone. Lightning surged from his body, erupting into a terrifying electric blast that sent the woman crashing back to the ground faster than she had risen. He hadn't even moved. Just simple gestures of his palm, and she was already defeated. Draken looked down at his hand. "Are telekinetic masters really this weak? Or am I just too? You?" The woman struggled to her feet, her body battered, bruised, blood pouring from fresh wounds. Draken moved. In an instant, his figure blurred into a flash of light. The very next moment, just as she blinked, he was already standing before. The woman locked eyes with Draken. Those eyes glowed with infinite might, divine wrath, like a god of lightning. It was simply terrifying. So terrifying that even a telekinetic master like her felt scared. The feeling of fear overtook all her senses, dulling her emotions for a moment. "Nothing." She barely managed to speak. "Kneel." Draken spoke lightly, his eyes spewing lightning energy so vast and terrifying, it felt as if the entire world was about to go up in flames. "Huh." The woman was stunned for a moment. Her pupils dilated as she looked at Draken in disbelief. "You didn't hear me?" Draken spoke lightly again. "I said kneel." Arcs of lightning burst from his body and struck the ground, scorching it into blackened earth. The woman was slightly grazed, and the lightning effortlessly destroyed the telekinetic barrier on her skin, causing a searing pain that nearly shut down her nervous system. She panicked, turning around to run. However, Draken coldly pointed his palm and spoke. "Last chance." The woman froze on the spot. Taking another step seemed easy, but she couldn't make up her mind to do it. It was as if every fiber of her muscles screamed in protest at moving forward. It felt like she was bound to the very earth, but it was just her imagination. She was scared of him, scared of death. Gradually, she turned around and looked at Draken with a sigh. "I surrender." Draken was silent, simply staring at her. "Yes, yes." She kneeled, one knee touching the ground. Someone theoretically comparable even to the level of Eleanor now bowed to him, and Draken hadn't even done anything. He felt a little exhilarated by this power, the power of absolute strength that could crush everything. This feeling was simply amazing. Even his dragon bloodline seemed delighted, erupting in exhilaration. Draken closed his eyes and returned to his calm and composed demeanor, as if nothing in this world could touch him. "What's your name?" Draken asked. "My name is Yolanda," she said with a bow of her head. "So, Yolanda, will you become my servant or not?" Draken could have killed her easily, but there was no point. She was more valuable alive. A telekinetic master held considerable worth to the human kingdom. Yolanda trembled but didn't respond. Just then, Draken noticed something strange, something that immediately made him grin. You never learn your lesson. Blood engulfed the entire area, forming into a blood domain that captured both of them. This is my home ground. Let's see if you can withstand my power here. Yolanda laughed triumphantly, a mocking grin on her face. Draken just stood there with his arms folded, calmly watching her. Oomph. Seeing him like this, Yolanda flinched for a moment. His calmness made her nervous. A flicker of uncertainty crept in her mind, but she moved instantly. Thousands of weapons formed from the blood of the domain and honed in on Draken. At the same time, she raised the sword she used to fly through the sky and cut her wrist. Immediately, blood gushed from her wrist, almost forming a river. Then, right before Draken's eyes, her body began to disintegrate into blood, merging with the surrounding domain. You can do that, Draken thought to himself. He was analyzing her every move, something that could prove useful for Zarek when he developed his own mutant telekinetic ability. That's why he simply stood there, observing everything. Suddenly, the blood began to boil. Draken felt a pull from within his body. His own blood was boiling, resonating with the blood outside, trying to escape. Immediately, Draken went pale, yet he didn't move an inch. My blood is trying to escape. An interesting technique, he commented lightly. Lightning erupted from his body, frying everything nearby. The pull from the blood gradually weakened. Then, Draken watched as the blood gathered, forming into the shape of multiple samurais. Blood samurais. Draken just stood there, and the samurai attacked. At the last moment, just as their attack neared, he discharged a surge of lightning that completely destroyed all of the blood samurais along with the weapons aimed at him. Is that all? Draken looked around. Yolanda felt like cursing. These were literally all her trump cards, and Draken destroyed them as if they were nothing. Silence. Should I make a move now? Draken asked, his brows twitching. Oh. For a moment, she couldn't even speak. 3. Draken started to count down lightly. I'm willing to give up. In the end, Yolanda sighed. The blood dome vanished, and Draken saw the clear sky again, nodding with a satisfied expression. Yolanda seemed to have truly given up. She looked at Draken with her brows furrowed. What do you want from me? It's simple. I want you to be my spy. You should have assumed that already, right? Draken said, handing her a pill with a mysterious smile on his face. Yolanda looked at the pill and gritted her teeth. If she took this pill, the consequences would be terrifying. The betrayal of humanity. It was a burden that would stain her, even in death, and everyone related to her. The consequences were enough to make one's head spiral in disbelief. But in the end, Yolanda took the pill and swallowed it. The fear of death won out. Draken watched with a calm, cold gaze. Only after confirming that she had fully swallowed it and that he could detonate it at any time did Draken finally withdraw his pressure. The two returned to Cynthia. Let's start our hunt, he commented lightly. What should I do? Yolanda asked, a confused expression on her face. You'll help us hunt humans for now? Draken grinned. Once she killed a human, there would be no going back. Even if she somehow managed to remove the effects of the life-and-death pill, she wouldn't be able to return. A quicksand where you can only sink, never rise. Yolanda was pale, but could only nod helplessly. And so, the party of 3 continued their hunt. But for Zarek, it was a different story. What do you think, General Kane? Should we move? It is our duty to help General Kale. How could we not provide assistance? Zarek said with the biggest, brightest smile on his face. Ah, that is true. Kale nodded. You really are one of humanity's heroes, so young, yet already so strong and brave. I believe you will become at least a telekinetic grandmaster. No, a telekinetic paragon in the future. We'd like to congratulate the Ragnarok Empire for already having a permanent future paragon, Alex commented from the side. You're simply overpraising me, Zarek smiled, cursing inwardly. Initially, he wanted to go alone, to hunt humans while protecting the dragons. Who knew he'd be forced to travel with these generals? After all, he was the general of the Ragnarok Empire, and he couldn't be allowed to roam freely in their territory. The Falcon Empire was closest to the Dragon Kingdom, and most of the dragons' paths to their home would be cut off here. That's why this was the perfect place for the dragon hunting festival. Elsewhere, dragons were also actively persecuted and hunted, but not as intensely. Dragons could usually escape and were forced back to the kingdom, where here they lay as the most important point for the dragon hunt. Draken looked ahead. The generals were all following a ragtag group of telekinetic users. They were all suspected to be cult members, and Zarek was dragged along to help persecute them with the others. Strangely, that white-haired girl with crimson eyes was also among the ragtag group. But Zarek was sure neither his group nor the others had a cult member like her. That meant this was completely false. For now, he needed to be sure. Were these generals scamming him, planning his death? It seemed unlikely, since he represented the Empire, and killing him would spark a full-blown war. Or did they have other intentions? Zarek silently contemplated the possibility. Just then, Alex raised his palm, and everyone stopped in place. Zarek looked ahead. The ragtag group had reached a cave. Is this one of the dragon caves? His eyes narrowed for a moment. The wide pathway, shrouded in darkness that even experts couldn't fully see through, felt very much like a dragon cave. Zarek was uncertain. The ragtag group quickly entered the cave, and silence fell over the area. Let's go inside. General Kale chuckled. Okay. Alex nodded. The 5 generals swiftly followed right after them. What do you think, General Kane? Do you believe they're really from the cult? General Kale asked with a smile. Zarek chose to remain silent. Why is this guy asking me so many questions? Is he suspicious or something? In situations like this, when you don't know a person's true intentions, it's better to stay quiet. As they walked deeper into the dark cave, they traveled for about an hour, but still hadn't reached anywhere, completely surrounded by darkness. Something's wrong, Alex suddenly shouted. Zarek felt like rolling his eyes. You only noticed that now, buddy. The other generals also scanned their surroundings with growing vigilance. What's going on? How did we fall into a trap? Kale said, extending his hand. The spear strapped to his back came into his grip, and with a swift motion, he raised it above his shoulder and hurled it through the air. Boosted by his telekinesis, the simple spear flew like a missile, striking the cave wall. Bang! A loud thud echoed, but that was all. The spear fell to the ground, losing momentum. My telekinetic master strength couldn't even leave a dent here, he said, narrowing his eyes. Zarek stared silently at the cave walls. He could feel a conspiracy brewing in the air. He activated his inspect skill. The cave walls are ordinary, so how could they withstand the full strength of a telekinetic master? A telekinetic master's full power was enough to destroy a small hill, and that spear throw could have easily done the same. But this was supposed to be a normal cave wall. How could it withstand that? All the generals looked visibly shaken as they watched Kale do nothing. Should we split up? Alex asked. Our signals and receivers have lost all contact here. We might have walked into an elaborate trap. Are those pesky cults really this capable? General Kale stomped the ground in frustration. It might not be the cult, Alex commented. The cult may be deeply hidden, but they don't have the capability to build something like this. This is likely another group's trap. Who could it be? General Kale suddenly paused, his eyes widening and pupils distorting. Could it be someone who specializes in these things? Who else but those races? Alex muttered. But those Naga bastards were supposed to be dead. Kale gritted his teeth. Are you saying some remnants escaped that event? That might be true, Alex said with grave seriousness. As he spoke, a sudden clap echoed ahead of them. Who's there? Kale shouted. It was the woman with white hair and crimson eyes. Took you long enough. She looked straight at them without a trace of fear. A spear lunged through the air, tearing the very atmosphere as it flew toward her. To everyone's absolute astonishment, the spear effortlessly phased through her body and slammed into the cave wall. You're not real, Kale growled. You know the specialty of the Nagas, she said, her crimson pupils locking onto him. This is just a virtual body after all. Kale froze. His body mechanically turned around and unleashed his telekinesis, attacking everyone, including Zarek. But it only lasted a few seconds before he regained control, cold sweat pouring down his back. I got invaded in my head. He spoke with a trembling voice. Is that even possible? I am a general who has fought in the army, but now a mere thing. Kale gritted his teeth. His eyes looked at the woman with complete hatred, an unbounded hatred. Stop. At this moment, Zarek spoke calmly. Think with your head, not with anger, General Kale. As previously mentioned, there were many races besides humans and dragons. The Nagas were just one of the many who lost in the bloody war before this era. Like all the others, they were forced to bow down. However, unlike some of the other races that submitted and became slaves to humans and dragons, the Nagas refused to bow. For their defiance, they were driven to the brink of extinction. They did not go down easily. The Nagas were once the guardians of Yggdrasil, a colossal tree that gave life to one of the largest forests in the world. Blessed with divine eyes, they could hypnotize or even petrify their enemies. In battle, they wielded an arsenal of powerful weapons and strange sorcery, each capable of unleashing terrifying destruction. Now that I think about it, both humans and dragons are the bad guys to every other race but their own. While musing on this thought, Zarek looked at the panicked general and the calm woman standing before them. He didn't make a move. To catch an enemy off guard, he had to be extremely careful. He couldn't afford to let her sense his intentions. When he struck, it had to be decisive, an action that would end everything in moments, giving his enemies no time to react or even think. Suddenly, Kale burst into laughter, his voice echoing through the cave. Do you think the mere remnants of a defeated race could defeat us? Kale extended his hand, and the spear levitated into the air, returning to him almost instantly. Gripping it tightly, he pointed the tip at her and closed his eyes. It's meaningless, humans. There's no way for you to attack me. Your fate will be the same as all the others who came before you, she said, her crimson eyes gleaming like blood itself. Oomph. Kale snickered in disdain, his eyes still closed as his telekinesis surged outward, spreading in all directions. The ground began to shake, and even the walls of the cave trembled. This was the full might of a telekinetic master. You don't, the woman spoke again. Suddenly, her pupils shifted from crimson to blue. The moment her eyes changed color, Kale, who had kept his eyes closed, suddenly felt his skin begin to turn gray. Is this petrification? Alex roared, his telekinesis surging outward to block the woman's gaze. But it was too late. Parts of Kale's skin had already turned to stone, gray and lifeless like weathered rock. Kale snapped his eyes open and looked down at the petrified patches on his body. Oomph. He sneered in disdain, flexing his muscles slightly. Let's see if you can handle this. With that, he raised his spear high, pointing it toward the ceiling. It began to glow with a brilliant light. Telekinetic magnetism and repulsion. Bang! The very air tore apart as the spear blurred and shot toward a specific point in the cave wall, its force shaking the entire chamber. This time, the entire cave shook as dust and debris exploded from the point of impact. When the dust finally settled, a bloody hole had been carved into the wall, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. Inside were strange, serpentine creatures, beings with the lower bodies of snakes and the upper halves of humans. They stood in formation around a glowing circle, and at the center of that circle stood a woman with long white hair, crimson eyes, and a strange wooden totem beside her. At that exact moment, the woman who had been standing in front of them vanished, turning into a blur, faster than the eye could follow. Zarek narrowed his eyes, but still didn't move. Kale sneered. So this is where you bastards were hiding. Step by step, he began to approach them, each footsteps echoing in the tense silence. Even as Kale crept closer, the figures didn't flinch, not a single muscle moved. They remained calm and steady, silently circling the woman at the center. As a general, Kale's instincts were sharp. Without hesitation, he recalled his spear and hurled it toward them with full force. The weapon tore through the air, heading straight for the group. But just as it was about to strike, the figures began to chant in an eerie, unfamiliar tone. In response, the girl at the center began to glow, and the totem merged with her. The light intensified rapidly, growing so blinding that everyone was forced to squint, shielding their eyes from the radiance. When the light finally subsided, Kale suddenly coughed up blood and dropped to his knees, veins bulging across his forehead. But he quickly gritted his teeth and forcefully pulled back his telekinetic power. Fortunately, as a master, his telekinesis possessed an eternal quality, one that couldn't be completely destroyed. If it was lower than a master, he would have been seriously injured already. Not everyone was like Zarek, who could not only regenerate quickly, but grow stronger through the process. Their eyes turned to the woman still glowing at the center. A faint, ethereal outline of a shield surrounded her, barely visible but unmistakably powerful. The Nagas stepped aside in unison as the woman slithered forward, her snake tail moving with swift, fluid grace. "Humans," she chuckled, her voice cold and laced with malice. "Today will be the day you meet your end." One of her pupils glowed blue, the other red, unnatural and ominous. At the sight of her, Alex's expression changed. He took a step back, visibly shaken. "Are you the Princess of Naga?" he asked. "That's right," she replied with a chilling smile. "You humans and dragons drove us to the brink of extinction. Now, the time for retribution has come, and I shall offer the heads of the 5 human generals for this auspicious day, the dawn of the Naga's rise." Her mismatched eyes gleamed, one in a brilliant crimson, the other in piercing blue. Then, without warning, Kale screamed in pain as her gaze focused on him. He was the first to be struck. "Everyone help!" Alex shouted. When I fought her before, her strength was at the peak of master level. Now, she might have reached Grandmaster. The 4 remaining generals, including Zarek, quickly unleashed their telekinetic power in an attempt to resist her overwhelming force. But it was futile. Her power tore through their defenses like a hot knife through butter. Kale collapsed on the spot, his entire body petrified, then shattered into pieces as it hit the ground. The others stared in disbelief. Just like that, a general, a powerful telekinetic master, was dead. But the woman didn't stop. She turned her gaze toward Alex and the others, unrelenting. In front of Zarek's stunned, disbelieving eyes, Alex turned to stone under her gaze. Within a minute, he too was dead. They were telekinetic masters, not just ordinary ones, but powerful enough to serve as generals of the strongest empire. And yet, they fell, one by one. In just a few minutes, they were all dead, turned to stone, and shattered to pieces. In the end, only Zarek remained. Strangely, the woman didn't attack him. She simply stared at him, her dual-colored eyes unblinking. Zarek remained calm and cold on the surface, but internally, he was on edge, always prepared to be recalled by the main body. A clone like this was far too valuable to lose without purpose. He spoke in a calm tone. "What do you want?" The woman tilted her head slightly. "Why is a weak human like you standing beside such strong ones?" Zarek's brow twitched. "Does it matter? You killed them already anyway. I sense something strange about you, something I'm drawn to." She spoke, her pupils glowing with a deep red light. Immediately, Zarek felt a foreign consciousness invade his mind, attempting to manipulate him. But he scoffed and, without hesitation, shattered the invading presence with the help of his skills. With skills like Hive Mind and many others, not to mention the numerous titles he had earned, Zarek was virtually immune to most forms of mental manipulation. His skills and titles stacked, granting layers of resistance. Unless his opponent's power reached truly incomprehensible levels, Zarek was confident he could withstand anything. That petrification ability, Zarek narrowed his eyes in thought. He extended his hand, and a massive hammer strapped to his back levitated into the air. With a firm grip, he seized it. "Oh, can you resist my hypnosis so easily?" the woman asked, her left pupil glowing even brighter as she tried once more to invade his mind. But Zarek remained unfazed. Her attempts were utterly futile, nothing more than an annoyance he could crush beneath his heel. After some time of trying, The woman finally stopped, her slitted, snake-like eyes narrowing. "What are you?" Zarek ignored the question. Instead, he smiled and asked calmly, "Are you a telekinetic grandmaster?" He extended his hand. "Even if you are, you're weak." His tone dripped with contempt. In the next instant, his telekinetic power surged outward, and he unleashed his special ability at full force. Gravity increased by 5 times. The entire world seemed to collapse in on itself. Space distorted. The very air twisted and discombobulated. He had only increased gravity by 3 times when he destroyed those garbage cans. Now it had nearly doubled. Even Zarek could feel the crushing weight. The force was immense, making even the slightest twitch of his muscles a challenge under the gravitational pull anchoring him to the ground. "What is this?" the woman shouted, panic creeping into her voice. Her slitted pupils quivered as she found herself rooted in place, the ground beneath her beginning to crack. "You're surprisingly weak," Zarek said coldly, sweat trickling down his temple. But he wasn't concerned. His body was already adapting to the pressure and growing stronger. Every moment since his arrival, he had been adapting, and now it was the same as well. You, the woman stammered, a flicker of panic in her voice. Her right eye glowed crimson, both pupils now shining with red and blue. Zarek felt a strange, invasive power strike him. Slowly, his skin began to wither, gray patches creeping across his body like spreading rot. "Petrification, huh?" He chuckled inwardly, even as the gray continued to grow, threatening to engulf him. Still, his heart remained steady calm. He focused his mind, tightening his grip on his gravity control. The pressure around them intensified, from 5x to 5.1x. Gradually, the woman sneered. "Let's see what gives out first, my body breaking down, or you're turning you to stone." The cave walls groaned under the crushing weight of Zarek's gravity. Cracks splintered through the stone, and debris rained from the ceiling. One heavy chunk nearly struck the Naga princess, forcing her to flinch, true fear flickering in her eyes. She stared at Zarek, her slitted pupils narrowing. If I'm struggling like this, then he must be in an even worse state. Her gaze sharpened, just as a massive slab of stone tore free from above and crashed down on Zarek. Bang! The impact echoed through the cavern. Dust and debris exploded outward. The princess smiled, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. He should be dead now. But as the dust cleared, the gravity only intensified, and from beneath the rubble, Zarek rose once more. A thin stream of blood trickled down his face from a gash on his head. He ran his tongue across it, tasting it, then grinned. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Madman," she muttered instinctively. His body was almost half petrified now, and the process was accelerating rapidly. But he didn't stop. In contrast, the woman had suffered only minor injuries, some strain from the crushing gravity, but nothing serious. "I thought you were interesting," she said, her voice cold. "But I'm not interested anymore." Her eyes flared with an even brighter crimson light, almost blinding in intensity. The petrification on Zarek's body surged. It crept faster than before, crawling up his neck, his jaw, his cheeks, until only his face remained untouched. It was a miracle he was even alive. And yet, the gravity continued to rise. "You're dead," she scoffed with disdain. Zarek, barely able to speak, managed to grin. "Are you sure?" he rasped. Just then, a faint blur of light flickered before him, a panel only he could see, and as the final patch of stone consumed his face, Zarek became a statue. She heaved a sigh of relief. "Luckily, that bastard died. My body couldn't withstand it anymore." She froze. The gravity, still pressing down on the cave, had not vanished. In fact, it had grown even stronger. Her pupils dilated in sheer terror. Her voice cracked as she whispered, How is this possible?" Right before her disbelieving eyes, Zarek's body began to regenerate, his stone-like skin fading, his flesh restoring, until he stood there fully healed, without a trace of decay. "Nothing is impossible," he said lightly. Then he grinned, raising a hand, its surface now glistening like polished stone. And thanks for the gift. Without warning, he clenched his stone hand and slammed it into the ground with overwhelming force. Bang! The earth quaked beneath him, the entire chamber trembling under the sheer impact of his blow. Not bad, Zarek nodded in satisfaction. My strength increases a bit with it. This, the Naga princess stammered, her voice trembling. Somehow, you turned my curse into your strength. That was a curse? Zarek raised a brow, amused. Interesting. He focused further. The gravity had now reached nearly 7 times the normal force. The cave groaned and buckled under the immense pressure. The princess's body was clearly beginning to break down under the relentless force, though she was still managing to hold on, for now. Suddenly, translucent panels appeared before Zarek's eyes. You have adapted to petrification through the skill Adapt. You have gained an exclusive skill bound to Adapt. Stone Skin. Stone Skin increases the defense and attack power of any part of the body the user chooses by at least 50%. The description was simple, but sometimes simplicity was perfection. Zarek smirked as he read the panel. Then he looked up at the Naga princess with a twisted, lecherous gaze, not one of lust, but something darker, hungrier. In a flash, he vanished, reappearing right in front of her. She froze, completely stunned. How can you even move right now? She whispered with dread. Zarek's eyes narrowed, brimming with murderous intent. Just answer me, he said coldly. Do you have other curses? Other curses, she repeated,